Chapter 728. He finally got a response. He didn't have to worry about other men taking advantage of the situation. Commander-in-Chief Xia was shocked that a student had such deep considerations and was relieved. However, when he heard his son laughing so happily, he couldn't bear to listen to it anymore. The 4 points you mentioned are very correct and comprehensive. I'm very relieved. Xia Jinyuan has been a troublemaker since he was young. The more you ignore him, the more he'll bother you. If you bother him in return, he'll be afraid. He's 6 years older than you and has some tricks up his sleeve. You should be more careful and not let him do as he pleases. The best way to deal with someone who wants a yard after taking an inch is to keep him in place from the start. That way, he won't try to take advantage of you. It was rare to see a father like Commander-in-Chief Xia who would undermine his son. Other people were afraid that their son would be taken advantage of. However, when it came to the Commander-in-Chief, he was afraid that his son wouldn't be taken advantage of and that he would develop an arrogant personality. Therefore, he was very serious about giving Yi Qian advice on how to subdue Xia Jinyuan. Yi Qian was dumbfounded. Why did it feel like she was the Commander-in-Chief's daughter and Major Xia was his son-in-law? He can't come back often from the army and won't bother you all the time. If you're afraid that he'll bother you during the holidays, you can stay in school. He can't do anything to you. Young lady, you have to remember that the harder it is to get something, the more precious it is. You're still young. When you become more successful in the future, you'll have a wider range of considerations. Don't jump to conclusions too early. You have to shop around for everything. Shop around? Commander-in-Chief Xia, do you think your son is a commodity? And he's not even a good commodity. Yi Qian was so shocked by Commander-in-Chief Xia's words that he couldn't keep a straight face. He quickly glanced at Xia Jinyuan in front of him and saw that the man who always had a smile on his face, as long as he wasn't on the battlefield, was expressionlessly looking at Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was giving him advice. Yi Qian bit her lip. What should she do? She really wanted to laugh. He originally thought that he would be criticized and educated by Commander-in-Chief Xia and be banned from interacting with Xia Jinyuan. But in the end, there was a huge reversal. The Commander-in-Chief did not object, but he had to be careful. Not only did he not object, he even told himself to be on guard and not let his son win her heart. He was tricking his own son, and he was tricking him right in front of his face. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was standing on the reviewing platform, was clearly so imposing that all the military leaders around him didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Why did he suddenly change? He didn't have the air of a commander at all, and he was very amiable to her. Could it be that all the higher-ups were like this? The higher the rank, the more dignified one would be, but wasn't that the case all the time? Dad, if my wife runs away, you'll have to wait for the family Xia to produce a second bachelor. Xia Jinyuan knew that he would be tricked by his father, but he didn't expect that he would be tricked to the extent of telling little Fox and even having to shop around. Commander-in-Chief Xia raised his eyes slightly and said calmly, I think little Yi is not bad, but I'm just giving you some advice. If you don't like it, you can ignore it. However, I still have to say that the military has always cherished talents. As for you wanting to be the second bachelor in the family Xia, I don't have any objections. You're not the only man in the family Xia. Little Yi, I think you're not bad. I can introduce you to your cousins. Yi Qian. What should she do? She wanted to jump out of the car. Chapter 729. Yi Qian, who wanted to jump out of the car, wanted to reduce his presence first. Having lived 2 lives, he was quite knowledgeable. In his previous life, most of the news he had seen were about sons cheating their fathers, but he had never seen a father cheating his son. This life had just begun, but it had already broadened her horizons. She wanted to jump out of the car, but she also wanted to laugh. It was really difficult for her to hold it in. Xia Jinyuan, who had been cheated, did not feel anything other than his face turning a little cold. When he heard that Commander-in-Chief Xia wanted to introduce Yi Qian to his cousins, he smiled coldly and said, after shopping around, my family is still the best. You'd better worry less about family matters and more about national affairs. He then said to Yi Qian, who was also having a hard time holding it in, Commander-in-Chief Xia is not very good at dealing with family matters in private. In the future, Commander-in-Chief Xia will be busy and won't have time to deal with our matters." Yi Qian did not say anything. He just smiled at Xia Jinyuan, revealing his pearly white teeth. There was a hint of slyness in his smile, and then he answered Commander-in-Chief Xia seriously. "You are right. In the future, I will try my best to avoid Captain Xia, so that even if he has time, he won't be able to find me easily. Although I have a good impression of Captain Xia, now is not the time for me to date Captain Xia. Also, please remind me that the harder it is to get something, the more precious it is. If I agree to Captain Xia now, once the novelty of Captain Xia wears off and he loses his popularity, I will only end up being abandoned. I will definitely remember your instructions. I will definitely ask Captain Xia to wait a little longer. When I am successful and have a wider range of considerations, I will have the capital to choose. When that time comes, you will be more assured when I am with Captain Xia." Commander-in-Chief Xia could say things like shopping around, but Yi Qian knew that she could not say it herself. That being said, who would want their son to be treated like a commodity and compared to a girl? Moreover, Commander-in-Chief Xia's words were a reminder to her that no matter how proactive his son was, as a girl, she still had to be more reserved. She was still young, so she should prioritize her studies and not think about other things for the time being. He also vaguely mentioned that Xia Jinyuan was used to tormenting people. He might be tormenting you now, but it didn't mean that he would continue tormenting you in the future. If one day she really became Xia Jinyuan's girlfriend, he still hoped that his son's girlfriend would also be successful. Commander-in-Chief Xia had put in a lot of effort to deal with his son. He didn't want to strain the relationship between father and son, so he had such a humorous conversation. It wouldn't make his son feel uncomfortable, and it wouldn't make the girl his son liked feel uncomfortable. Xia Jinyuan understood, and so did Yi Qian. When Commander-in-Chief Xia heard the words of the little girl in front of him, there was a real smile in his eyes. She was indeed a very smart girl. She wasn't just smart in small matters, but smart in a way that was full of spirit. Commander-in-Chief Xia looked at the little girl who still maintained the standard sitting posture of a soldier as she got into the car. He joked again, "I'm really relieved that you understand. However, if you have any difficulties, you can still ask him to solve them. Don't be afraid of troubling him. Since he wants to marry a good wife, how can he not put in some effort, and put in some effort in the early stages? Don't spoil him. When it's time for a man to appear, he should appear. When it's time to order him around, he should order him around. Otherwise, how can he call himself your future boyfriend? Don't you think so?" Chapter 730. Of course, he was referring to Yi Qian. Yi Qian, who was called out, steadied the smile that was about to overflow from the corners of his mouth. He shifted his gaze away from Xia Jinyuan's handsome face that was full of helplessness and continued to answer the commander, who was merciless when it came to trapping his son. "You're right. I'm sure Captain Xia will keep that in mind. She had to order him around when it was time to do so. Who was she to order the son of the commander around? It was better for her to play her part and follow the rules. Uncle Chun and Grandpa Jen had said that it was better to rely on oneself than on others. She still believed that she could rely on herself at all times. Little fox, I will definitely remember this in my heart, and always remind myself that your business is my business. It was Commander-in-Chief Xia who told me how to behave as a boyfriend." Xia Jinyuan could tell that his father had been observing Little Fox. He wouldn't stop him from finding a girlfriend, but there was one thing that he had to agree on, and that was her character. Now that he had said this, he knew that Commander-in-Chief Xia had absolute confidence in Little Fox's character. Yi Qian raised his eyes and looked at him calmly. He pursed his lips and smiled obediently. "Captain Xia, you don't have to express yourself. This is enough." She didn't know how to face him if she had to continue to express herself. She had feelings for him, and she also had feelings for him, but she was far from seeing him as her boyfriend. She didn't have a boyfriend in her previous life, so it didn't matter if she had one in this life. Yi Qian really didn't have any expectations for love. Xia Jinyuan may be a little reckless, but he has always been a man of his word. No matter what happens in the future, you're a girl, so it's only right for him to take care of you. Commander-in-Chief Xia had a smile in his eyes. Although he had a dignified expression that had accumulated over time, his tone was kind and amiable. And you don't have to give in to him for my sake. Just do what you need to do. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and let out a long sigh. After talking for so long, I finally heard a word of praise. Little fox, you don't know how much courage it took for me to introduce you to Commander-in-Chief Xia. His body was completely turned sideways, and his left hand was bent to support himself on the center armrest between the two driver's seats. When he turned his head, he glanced at Commander-in-Chief Xia's face and made a small gesture with his right hand before he started complaining to Yi Qian. Commander-in-Chief Xia's father is different from other people's fathers. I think you saw it yourself. Other people's fathers are praising their sons, but my father's father's fathers. Ever since I was young, when other children came home, their parents would always ask, "Did you have fun today? Did anyone bully you?" Go. Stand at attention for half an hour. Guards, time me. If anyone dares to give him food, you'll have to run 20 kilometers with weights on your back. Little fox, tell me how hard my childhood was. Commander-in-Chief Xia sighed in his heart when he heard his son mention the past and the hand gesture he made when he turned around. People always say that girls side with outsiders, but in his family, it was his son who sided with outsiders. Seeing that his future girlfriend was still reserved, he thought of ways to liven up the atmosphere. He was afraid that she wouldn't cooperate, so he used hand gestures to remind her. Chapter 731. However, the little girl was indeed reserved. It had been half an hour, but she still maintained the standard sitting posture of a soldier. No matter how bumpy the car was, her back did not relax at all. She had indeed undergone strict training. Her every move revealed the coldness and loftiness of a soldier. As Yi Qian pursed his lips and smiled faintly, Commander-in-Chief Xia smiled and said, "He got into so much trouble when he was young that there was a period of time when I didn't dare to return to the villa complex because I would be stopped by my colleagues on the way back. They would complain about what happened to my son today, what kind of trouble he got into, and what kind of trouble he caused. That period of time, to use an idiom, was a period of darkness. Now that I think about it, I'm considered good-tempered that I didn't strangle him to death back then." Yi Qian broke out in a cold sweat. How naughty was Captain Xia back then? He was so naughty that the commander-in-chief did not dare to return home after work. Thinking about it, she pursed her lips and smiled again. No wonder he could still torture people now. No wonder she had a headache whenever she saw him. If he was so naughty when he was young, how could she be a match for him? The anti-chemical regiment was 2.5 hours away from the provincial capital by car. Now, only half an hour had passed. After passing the test of Commander-in-Chief Xia Jinyuan noticed that Yi Qian was still a little uncomfortable, so he began to talk about his childhood. Xia Jinyuan did not feel embarrassed when he brought up his childhood one by one. Instead, he said proudly, "In the villa complex, there are only two extremes of children. One has excellent grades, and the other has terrible grades. Little fox, guess which one I belong to?" The former. The atmosphere was really good. Yi Qian, who had a smile in his eyes, said, "But I'm not sure. It could be the latter. After all, the current Captain Xia still gives the commander-in-chief a headache." Wasn't that right? He told the commander-in-chief that he wanted to find a high school student as his girlfriend. Only the commander-in-chief could resist beating him up. Smart. I belonged to the latter. I was disobedient in school, and I was even more disobedient in the villa complex. All I wanted to do was play, and my favorite game was war. A few groups were divided into two groups. One was the enemy, and the other was our army. I was the commander-in-chief of our army. Even if the commander doesn't have a military uniform, he should at least have a hat. So, I took two of my friends to steal hats. We climbed through the water pipes and stole at least 20 hats from the logistics building. It just so happened that the military uniforms were being improved that year, and the hats were all new. In the end, I stole all the hats of the guards. After I had my fun, I realized that the hat I stole back was not quite the same. Initially, I wanted to bring it home, but I immediately gave it up. After giving the dirty hat to an enemy with good grades, I went home happily. Yi Qian now understood why the commander-in-chief didn't want to go home. Xia Jinyuan was so mischievous that it was worrying. He asked, "What happened after that? How did you solve it?" Thinking about what had happened in the past, Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was still traumatized, answered on behalf of his son. Later, we found the new military caps from the school bags of more than 20 children, and the mastermind stayed at his grandparents' house that night. The whole courtyard was filled with children's cries, except for my house. It was indeed Captain Xia. Yi Qian secretly gave him a thumbs up for being able to stay out of such a big matter. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was distracted and recalled the past, said sadly, "Just now I saw that you seemed to have the urge to beat him up. Go ahead and beat him up. Don't be afraid of hurting him, and don't be afraid that I'll be angry." Yi Qian, who had finally relaxed, was so shocked that his back tensed up again. The commander-in-chief saw through it. Chapter 732. Yi Qian, who was seen through, maintained a calm expression and maintained the smile at the corner of his mouth. He calmly replied, "Just now I did have the intention to spar with Captain Xia, but I'm not his opponent yet. Even if I had the intention, I would have to rest for the time being." Commander-in-Chief Xia, who had been in the military for half of his life, was not someone who liked to listen to flattery. He had always admired frank and upright soldiers, and Yi Qian's character of not hiding anything and speaking frankly made him even more impressed. The young lady had a calm temperament, was not a flatterer, and was rarely open and upright. It was not surprising that his son, who had high standards, liked her. "We're just chatting now. Xiao Yi, you don't have to be nervous." Commander-in-Chief Xia saw her relaxed back tense again, and then looked at her front, where even her eyebrows were furrowed. It was obvious that she was worried about her future girlfriend's son. He felt that it was better for him to be a kind and loving elder. Back then, even though Old Master and Old Madam did not agree to his marriage with his ex-wife, they did not come forward to stop it. They even reminded him to treat his wife more well, as she had given birth to a family Xia's children. With family traditions, Commander-in-Chief Xia really did not want to break up the couple. "Although I'm a commander-in-chief, I'm also a father and an elder at home. Xiao Yi, you don't have to be too nervous right now. Just treat me as your elder." If it weren't for Xia Jinyuan, Yi Qian would not have known that the commander-in-chief on the stage was so amiable. With his laughter, Yi Qian, who had a good mental fortitude, gradually relaxed. From the anti-chemical regiment to the provincial military, except for the first half hour that made Yi Qian feel uneasy, he did not feel any pressure after that. Because he was a soldier, Commander-in-Chief Xia's speech was incisive, especially when it came to some military analysis. Almost every sentence he said hit the nail on the head. When he talked about war, modern warfare, and future warfare, Yi Qian admired him even more. In less than 10 years, the whole world is focused on information warfare. From aerial reconnaissance to ground combat, it's all electronic information warfare. After the Gulf War, everyone realized that non-contact combat would be an important way of fighting and would become one of the tactical means of high-tech warfare. There are casualties in war, but how to reduce casualties and achieve victory has always been a difficult problem for the armies of all countries. Non-contact warfare is an advantageous tactic. Whether it is our country or other countries, we strive to use this method of warfare to kill the enemy and protect ourselves to the greatest extent. You're still young. While you're working hard to learn military theory, you still have to master information warfare. For example, several experimental research labs at the National University of Science and Technology played a leading role in this field. It's a good thing that you're hot-blooded now, but you have to look further into the future because modern warfare isn't like the wars that happened in the past. Born in an era of peace, you must remember that while humans are progressing, war is also progressing. As for what kind of war the future will be, Commander-in-Chief Xia's original intention was to remind Yi Qian to study hard. As he spoke, he habitually talked about future wars. After a slight pause, he smiled and asked Yi Qian, "Tell me, what kind of war will the future be like?" At this time, Yi Qian was shocked by Commander-in-Chief Xia's words. Commander-in-Chief Xia was right. In less than 10 years, all the powerful countries would be using electronic warfare tactics. The emergence of drones, stealth fighters, and radio electromagnetic interference all represented electronic warfare. Chapter 733. But now, it's 1997. Everything is still under the cover of peace, and our country is still keeping a low profile. After the sanctions in 1990, the United States dismantled all the temporary bases in our country. With the assistance of the United States military, the expert team dismantled all the machinery and equipment, blew up a few completed tanks, and destroyed all the blueprints and design plans at the same time. In terms of the Air Force, the United States Air Force refused to continue delivering the advanced F-16A fighter jets to our country, as well as dozens of B-type fighter jets. Since then, our country began to remain silent in the military and began to lay low until the 1999 military parade. In terms of weapons and equipment, 42 types of equipment were reviewed, and more than 90% of them were new, and most of them were self-designed and produced. These high-tech weapons and equipment became our country's main weapons of war and also showed the true rise of a big country. In the past, she didn't care about the military. Now that she was on this path, and after listening to Commander-in-Chief Xia's words, she completely believed that the military strength of our country had already made a great leap. And as the highest-ranking general of the three armed forces, he had already set his sights on the forefront of the world. Xia Jinyuan often discussed future wars with the commander-in-chief, and he never felt that this topic was difficult. But now that he was discussing it in front of Yi Qian, he couldn't help but worry. He smiled and said, "Dad, are you testing me or her? If you're testing me, then we've never had a clear winner or loser in future wars. If you're testing my future girlfriend, then this topic is too profound." From a professional point of view, this is indeed a profound topic. But as people who are determined to become outstanding soldiers, this is something that you need to consider. Commander-in-Chief Xia's expression became a little dignified. He said to the two of them, "No matter what your current status is, as long as you're willing to join the military, you have to have this awareness." He didn't want his son to be a conservative, and he didn't want his daughter-in-law to be a short-sighted person. If they didn't know anything, he could teach them, he could remind them, but they absolutely couldn't avoid it. As for Commander-in-Chief Xia's issue, Yi Qian had her doubts. After all, she was reborn. Even though she didn't pay much attention to military matters in her previous life, she had still seen some reports on the news. She pursed her lips slightly. After deliberating in her heart for a while, she said in a cold voice with a steel-like sharpness, "My view on future warfare is also very simple. In the future, close combat will become a declining tactic. The main tactic should be focused on long-range combat, and non-contact combat will inevitably become a major development trend in future warfare. Just as you said, electronic warfare is a long-range battle, and it will be the main battle tactic of the various countries. Using a program to control weapons and accurately control the shooting range is just like a fighter jet dropping cannonballs in the sky. The ground is damaged, but the fighter jet is fine. Both will strive to heavily damage the enemy and ensure a great victory for our side." From the beginning to the end, Xia Jinyuan's heart was filled with shock. He was completely stunned by her. He didn't expect this little fox to have such a deep understanding of the future war despite her young age. It was so deep that she could already see what the future war would be like. Commander-in-Chief Xia had a whole new level of respect for Yi Qian. He was equally shocked as he repeatedly said, "Good." Then, he smiled deeply and said, "Very good. It's rare that you can see so far at such a young age. If you really become Xia Jinyuan's girlfriend, it'll be his good fortune." Chapter 734. In our family, Xia, we don't care about family background. What we care about is the level of thought and the quality of a person's character. You don't have to feel burdened when you interact with him. However, I believe in you. The size of Xia Jinyuan's family background is not something you should be concerned about, nor is it a reason for your heart to be moved. At this point, Commander-in-Chief Xia was very satisfied with the high school student that his son had chosen. He did not find the wrong person. It was just that he was a little too young. Fortunately, Although he was young, he had a sense of propriety. Only then could he truly be at ease. He was not afraid that the two of them would do something that would destroy their futures. Yi Qian smiled and replied, "Commander-in-Chief, don't worry. Captain Xia and I are not in a relationship right now. I won't do anything that would destroy our futures. I believe in myself and Captain Xia. I'm not worried about the two of you. A far-sighted person would not do anything that would destroy their futures." Commander-in-Chief Xia nodded and asked Xia Jinyuan, who had been silent for a long time, "Are you going directly to the anti-chemical regiment in the afternoon? Or do you have something else to do?" Xia Jinyuan's eyes were deep and dark. His thin lips slightly straightened, and his voice was deep and cold. He said calmly, "I'll go back to the anti-chemical regiment in the afternoon. I'll send you off first, then send Yi Qian off." As he spoke, an obscure light rose and fell in the depths of his eyes. It seemed that he did not fully understand Little Fox. He did not know that she was so far-sighted. She was much more far-sighted than him, a veteran who grew up in a military compound and had been in the army for several years. Commander-in-Chief Xia looked at the time and replied, "Okay." He then asked the driver about the itinerary. Yi Qian sighed softly in her heart. This was the first time she used what she knew from her previous life to answer a question from this life. She felt a little uneasy in her heart. She did not look at Xia Jinyuan, but she could feel his deep and heavy gaze on her. He must be thinking, how did she know all this? Yes, she was so young. How could she know what future battles were? How could she know what tactics will be used in future battles? Yi Qian was too young to answer, but a woman who had lived 2 lives could. As a woman who had lived 2 lives and had a secret that she couldn't tell anyone, how could she open her heart and accept the other half of her life? Commander-in-Chief Xia was happy. His daughter-in-law was indeed a good choice, but there were still a few years before she would truly become his daughter-in-law. It all depended on how the two of them developed. The car entered the provincial capital and soon arrived at the provincial military base. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who had gained an understanding of Yi Qian and was very satisfied with him in all aspects, said with a smile, "I still have to go back to the military base for a small meeting. You two can go do your own things." After chatting for about an hour and talking about military affairs for about 40 minutes, Commander-in-Chief Xia was so satisfied that he could completely ignore her age. He rolled down the car window and waved at Yi Qian, who had already gotten out of the car. After a few more words of advice, he ordered the driver to start the car. The car had already driven into the provincial military base. Yi Qian raised her head, and her gaze slowly fell on the huge national emblem directly above the entrance of the provincial military base. She then looked at Xia Jinyuan, who was standing silently beside her, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She said, "In less than 2 years, I will also have this national emblem on my body." Because her goal was the military academy. This was also the hope of Uncle Chun and Uncle Jin. "You definitely will, because you will become an excellent soldier," Xia Jinyuan said slowly. There was a firm trust in his words. Chapter 735. Yi Qian smiled. It was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Yi Qian's fair skin glowed like pearls as she stood under the sun. Her shoulder-length hair was tied up with a black hair tie, accentuating her delicate facial features. When she smiled, one could clearly see that her dark and watery eyes were burning brighter than the sun. "You trust me unconditionally, just like Uncle Chun and Grandpa Jin," Xia Jinyuan liked to hear that. His thin lips slowly curved into a smile. It was 32 degrees Celsius, and he was wearing a military green uniform. Under the sunlight, there was a thin layer of sweat on his handsome forehead. He didn't look ugly, but he looked masculine and mighty. "If I don't trust my future girlfriend, who else can I trust?" he replied. Yi Qian smiled at him and said, "Captain Xia, although I don't have parents, I still have 2 elders. If you want to be my boyfriend, it will be a little difficult. Grandpa Jin and Uncle Chun told me from the beginning that a woman should be indomitable, independent, and confident. She should be able to live her life to the fullest without relying on anyone. You want to be my boyfriend? Captain Xia, don't be so confident." When she heard him tell her that he had mentioned it to Commander-in-Chief Xia, she suppressed these words in her heart. Now that the commander-in-chief was gone, she, who had no psychological burden, could naturally say it out loud. Xia Jinyuan narrowed his eyes, revealing a dangerous aura that Yi Qian was familiar with. Do you think that will be a problem? At the entrance of the provincial military base, the bold Major Xia put his hands in his trouser pockets and leaned his slender body towards her. I'm a reckless person, so reckless that even Commander-in-Chief Xia didn't dare to go home. Little fox, do you think I won't be able to make the two elders agree? If the action of narrowing his eyes was done by a wretched man with unclear eyebrows and eyes, she would find that person even more wretched and disgusting. However, Xia Jinyuan's facial features were elegant and noble, and his eyes were deep and cold. When he narrowed his eyes, he didn't look wretched at all. Instead, he looked like a sleeping cheetah, so elegant that even though he knew it was dangerous, he still wanted to look at it for a long time. Yi Qian looked at him, but in her heart, she thought about the dangerous man in front of her who wouldn't give up until he achieved his goal. His words couldn't be taken as a joke, and she had to take it seriously. Her delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly, and she said calmly, Uncle Chun and Grandpa Jin are both veterans of the battlefield. What kind of people haven't they seen before? Since they're teaching me, they won't easily agree to let a man who appeared out of nowhere take me away. This wasn't the first time she had reminded her to prioritize her studies. How could Xia Jinyuan agree so easily? I have an innocent and cute little fox. Although she's smart and quick-witted, it's a pity that she met a smarter and more difficult hunter like me. It's difficult for her to escape. Xia Jinyuan laughed, and his laughter was deep and mellow like wine. Uncle Chen already knows what I'm thinking. If I go over and tell him that Commander-in-Chief Xia doesn't object, do you think Uncle Chen will stop me? Or will he nod in agreement? He had his eyes on her, so naturally he had considered all the factors that needed to be considered. For example, how to get the approval of Uncle Jin and Uncle Chun was an important consideration. So how could he miss it? The smart hunter made a move. Although he didn't have much experience, it was because he was smart that he considered everything. He took one step at a time and didn't allow for any mistakes. Chapter 736. He leaned over, and the distance between them was so close that she felt as if she was enveloped by the faint mint smell on his body. When she was about to take a step back, Xia Jinyuan had already stood up straight leisurely and said, Don't doubt it. Uncle Chin does know. Little fox, you have to know that everything I said was true and valid. I said that you would be my future girlfriend and future wife. This is absolutely true. I've also said that I'll hold your hand and lead you to the peak, and I'll never leave you. This is effective, and the time limit is in my lifetime. Yi Qian was shocked by his words. He was afraid that Xia Jinyuan was trying to blackmail him. So he asked suspiciously, You told Uncle Chun? When did this happen? Why didn't I know about it? Uncle Chun definitely wouldn't hide anything about me. If you really told him about it, why didn't Uncle Chun beat you up then? Yi Jian really didn't know that when they were training in the No Man's Land that year, they accidentally met the Shuiyu Brigade and got rid of the mercenaries sent by other countries. As well as an active soldier of another country, Headmaster Chen took the initiative to talk to Xia Jinyuan when he was resting due to his waist injury. Moreover, it was Principal Chen who directly cut to the chase and said that he had noticed that Major Xia was interested in Unyielding. I can tell that Major Xia is interested in Unyielding. If it's just a momentary interest, Major Xia, I advise you not to provoke an orphan. What did Xia Jinyuan say at that time? Faced with Yi Qian's skepticism, Xia Jinyuan narrowed his cheetah-like eyes. He still remembered all the things he said at that time. Are you afraid that I'll blackmail you? Uncle Chun not only knew that I was interested in a little fox a long time ago, but he also warned me to stay away from you. Xia Jinyuan said with great interest. At the same time, he admired Ma Yingli's expression, which began to change. There was shock, anger, and a little disbelief. In front of others, the little fox had always been indifferent. It was impossible for her to reveal her 7 emotions and 6 desires. Only in front of him did she show both joy and anger. No matter how many faces she had, In front of him, she was still a real and intelligent little fox. Unfortunately, she still hadn't realized that she was the real Yi Qian in front of Xia Jinyuan. It didn't matter. The two of them still had enough time. Although life was only a few tens of thousands of days, in the following days, in her life, in his life, there would definitely be each other's presence. When Yi Qian heard this, he was already half convinced. If Uncle Chen knew about this, he would definitely warn him. Even Uncle Chen knew about it a long time ago. That was why she was so embarrassed and angry at the same time. What did you say to Uncle Chen, and when did you say it? The night when you came to school to send me off to train with the motor vehicle soldiers? If she really wanted to talk about it, she probably only had the chance to do so that night. Xia Jinyuan smiled faintly and said, "There's no hurry. I'll return to the anti-chemical regiment at 7:30 p.m. We still have a few hours to talk about it slowly." She was anxious, but he wasn't. "It's a little hot outside. Let's find a place to talk slowly. Let's go to the pharmacy first. Yesterday, the military doctor said that you had to change your bandages after today's military training. I guess you didn't go. That was because he didn't smell any anti-inflammatory medicine on her body. As a soldier who wore a training uniform or a combat uniform, he would always carry anti-inflammatory medicine and other commonly used drugs with him. He was always particularly sensitive to such smells." Chapter 737. Yi Qian didn't change her medicine and planned to go to the pharmacy alone to buy some medicine before going back to school. When she heard what he said, she looked up at the entrance of the military district. This wasn't a good place to talk. There were sentries at the entrance, and they had probably noticed them. It was a restricted military area. If it weren't for the fact that he was in military uniform and she was in camouflage, the sentries would have already chased them away. Seeing that she didn't reject him, Xia Jinyuan's smile deepened. The sharpness in his eyes was replaced with gentleness. Yi Qian inadvertently glanced at him and felt her vision blur. She hurriedly looked away. After living for 2 lifetimes, Xia Jinyuan was indeed the most outstanding and good-looking man she had ever met. He was outstanding, good-looking, capable, and had a good family background. His temperament was elegant and noble. Who could bear to reject such a man? Even though she tried to mentally prepare herself every day, she still couldn't escape from him. She did have feelings for him. But what could she do? Just because she had feelings for him didn't mean she could fall in love immediately. She still had a lot of things to do. Relationships weren't her priority. Yi Qian adjusted her breathing and said calmly, "There's a pharmacy in the alley behind the school. I bought some and went back to the dorm to change. Captain Xia, you should go back to the anti-chemical regiment. After all, you're here to study." She hurriedly looked away and slowly regained her composure, leaving only a faint blush on her face. When Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows slightly, the smile in his eyes deepened. Sometimes, he didn't mind using his masculinity to attract the calm and self-controlled little fox. Women doll themselves up for the man they love, and so did men. Later, buy a small first aid kit and go back to school. You have to prepare some commonly used medicine yourself. Also, are you sure it's convenient to go back to the dorm to change your medicine? Aren't you afraid your classmates will ask you questions? Xia Jinyuan put an arm around her shoulders and walked towards the main road where they could hail a taxi. After buying the medicine, we'll go to the hotel. Then you can rest for a while before going back to school. Yi Qian struggled out of his arms and glared at him. "Don't get touchy. The commander-in-chief said that I'm still young and shouldn't mess around. The commander-in-chief also said that since you're my future girlfriend, I should take care of you more." Xia Jinyuan didn't want to keep a distance from her. His deep eyes looked at Yi Jian, whose face was flushed. The faint smile on his lips was charming and noble. "Do you know why the commander-in-chief didn't object after seeing you?" "I don't want to know." If I had known that the commander-in-chief would object, I would have definitely told the commander-in-chief that you must insist on opposing and remain unwavering in your opposition. Xia Jinyuan did not get angry. Instead, he chuckled and said, "Are you angry? Be good. Don't get angry and hurt yourself. The commander-in-chief's objection is invalid. What I want to do, the person I fancy and the person I like have nothing to do with him. So, Don't worry about the commander-in-chief objecting to our relationship." Every time this happened, Yi Qian could only remain silent. She was not angry at all, nor was she afraid that the commander-in-chief would object. Most importantly, she just wanted to know why the commander-in-chief didn't object after seeing her. However, after hearing what he said, it became that she was worried that the commander-in-chief would object. "Captain Xia, you must have been beaten by the commander-in-chief a lot when you were young," Yi Qian asked through gritted teeth. He was so annoying, so good at twisting the meaning of others' words, and so natural. She really wanted to beat him up. Chapter 738. What should she do? Her fists were itching to punch him. Major Xia, who grew up being beaten up, raised his eyebrows and looked at her meaningfully. He said slowly, "Why are you in such a hurry to find out about my childhood? I thought I said enough in the car, but it turns out my little fox doesn't think it's enough." "You don't have to answer. I don't have a desire to know everything about Captain Xia's childhood." Yi Qian's face stiffened. She thought that she still needed to get used to Xia Jinyuan's other side, his thick-skinned side. It was clearly a venting sentence, but he misinterpreted it as a question. In Xia Jinyuan's eyes, Yi Qian was undoubtedly adorable. She was so adorable that he wanted to get closer to her again and again, wanting to know more about her. He beat him often, but after every beating, my dad would have to go back to the family home to receive a lecture. Aunt Lu, who took care of me, would immediately call my grandfather every time I was beaten up. After that, I would cry on the side while my dad was being lectured by my grandfather. It was a repeat of this almost every day. When I reached the rebellious stage of my youth, my dad would sometimes rather stay in the military guest house than return to the villa complex. He was afraid that his colleagues in the villa complex would drag their sons to his door. When he mentioned his mischievous past, Xia Jinyuan's handsome face was full of smiles. However, Yi Qian saw a hint of coldness in the corners of his eyes. When he finally said, "A child without a mother is such a headache," Yi Qian's eyelids twitched. She pursed her lips and said, "At least you have a father. My father died before my mother. After my mother passed away, other children happily called out Dad and Mom every day. As for me, I didn't even know where to find my own parents." Was she trying to comfort him? But using her sad past to comfort him really made his heart ache. Xia Jinyuan stopped in his tracks. He looked at the girl who looked sad, even when she was comforting someone. His eyes were filled with pity for her. In the years to come, he only hoped that her life would be peaceful and that she would no longer be sad. Yi Qian, who didn't realize that his comforting words made his heart ache, couldn't help but stop. Dai Qing's elegant brows furrowed. "You're not leaving? Do you want to stay and enjoy the beautiful scenery of the provincial military base?" The sunlight moved along with the swaying shadows of the trees, and the man in military uniform, standing in the mottled light and shadow, was the most beautiful scenery here. The military uniform was slim-fitting, and the military cap was pressed to the brim. He was handsome and mighty, and only felt that it was a blessing of 3 lifetimes to see such an outstanding man. Yi Qian had never been attracted to beauty, but every time he saw Xia Jinyuan, especially Xia Jinyuan in his military uniform, he would be dazzled and his heart would race. 10 miles of spring breeze can't compare to your smile when you look back. It turns out that beauty in the eyes of the beholder can be so stunning that it can make people intoxicated for a long time. Xia Jinyuan looked at the most beautiful scenery and the most beautiful person. His cold eyes were as bright as the cold stars in the winter night. Although she had lost her parents, her children would eventually have to go on a long journey when they grew up. In that case, let him take care of her for the rest of her life, lest she be sad, and protect her for the rest of her life. Looking at her, Xia Jinyuan smiled faintly and said slowly, "In my heart, in my eyes, the most beautiful scenery in the world is the person in front of me." At this moment, he smiled slightly, and she suddenly became absent-minded. The provincial military base was also built against the mountains. It was the site of an old revolutionary base. The buildings outside were filled with a modern vibe, but deep in the shade of the trees, there were red brick houses. Through the fence, One could vaguely see the buildings that had been around for a long time. Chapter 739. Autumn had already passed, and the wind was blowing. As it blew the leaves off the camphor tree, it also swept up the yellow leaves on the ground. A leaf slowly fell from the tree and floated past Yi Qian's eyes. In that second, the figure of a man in a military uniform blurred. Yi Qian was stunned by his sudden words. She didn't know that words of love could be so moving. She was caught off guard, and her heart began to palpitate. His gentleness instantly permeated her limbs and bones. She didn't even have the chance to reject him. Just like that, he occupied a corner of her heart and broke her high walls. Xia Jinyuan chuckled. He didn't see any sadness in her eyes because of the past. Instead, he saw her being stunned because of him. You're daydreaming again. When did you develop this habit of daydreaming? He raised his hand to remove the leaf that had fallen on her head. It brought with it a masculine scent that was both strong and gentle. Yi Qian, who had forgotten to breathe, suddenly came back to her senses when she heard his voice and scent. She coughed violently. She had forgotten to breathe earlier, but now she took a deep breath and the air rushed in her lungs, causing her trachea to itch. When Xia Jinyuan saw this, he laughed so hard that even his chest was shaking. He quickly stroked her back with his slender hand and sighed. So, it's because I was daydreaming. It seems like my appearance is still somewhat useful. At least it can seduce the little fox into forgetting herself. Seduce. Yi Qian, who was coughing so hard that she couldn't breathe properly, looked up. She wanted to glare at him fiercely, but to Xia Jinyuan, her watery eyes were just shy. His smile was gentle, and his hand was still stroking her back. Then his gaze deepened. This little fox, he really couldn't help but want to kiss her. He wanted to kiss those eyes that made his heart race. Captain Xia is so good-looking and deliberately smiled beautifully in front of me. If my eyes weren't dazzled, how could I live up to Captain Xia's painstaking efforts? Yi Qian wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. When she saw his dark eyes, her heart skipped a beat. She seemed to have a premonition that something was about to happen. She quickly ran away from him, away from his pervasive presence that made her flustered. She was in a daze because he was handsome, and she was also in a daze because of his words of love. In short, she was indeed in a daze. The embarrassed Yi Qian flew away, his face uncontrollably burning red. After a while, his face and ears were red, but his heart was still trembling. Xia Jinyuan's eyes were filled with amusement as he watched her leave quickly. He raised his hand and tapped his lips with his index finger. Her breath was on his finger. She escaped at the right time. If she was half a second later, she would have kissed him on the green bridge leading to the main road in the military compound. The thought of kissing him didn't disappear with her escape. Instead, it became more intense. There seemed to be some distance between the last kiss, and now he wanted to kiss her again. The blushing Yi Qian really felt that she was fleeing. Only he could make her feel flustered. What was this? Logically speaking, she was a few years older than him. Where do you think you're going? The weather is changing. Let's call a cab. She walked quickly, but she couldn't keep up with Xia Jinyuan's long legs. After he caught up with her, he put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her into his embrace. Your wound is already a little inflamed. If you get drenched by the rain, you won't be able to train with the soldiers for the next few days, little fox. Yi Qian, who was already flustered, was suddenly pulled into his embrace. She instinctively lifted her leg and stepped on his foot. Let go, Xia Jinyuan. Chapter 740. Be good if you're injured. Don't move around. Be careful of my hand touching your arm. The corners of Xia Jinyuan's mouth curled up. He lifted his leg and avoided her movement. He hailed a taxi and lowered his head to her ear. He lowered his voice and laughed softly. Good girl, get in the car first. It's starting to rain. Once autumn passed, the weather changed quickly. A few minutes ago, the sun was still shining brightly, but now, dark clouds were gathering from all directions and enveloping the entire provincial capital. The rain started to fall before the thunder, and lightning even started. Even when he spoke, he was so close to her ear that Yi Qian could feel his warm lips brushing against her ear. His lowered voice had a hint of teasing. Yi Qian was angry and helpless. How did she end up with such a dangerous man? When she first met him, he was as cold as a sword, elegant and indifferent. Why was he so different in private? Yi Qian's fingertips were trembling. She was the type of person who became braver with every setback. If she was pushed too far, she would definitely fight back. She gritted her teeth and said, "I can walk and take a taxi myself. Captain Xia, you don't have to take care of me so carefully. You have to take good care of her. Otherwise, her future girlfriend will be unhappy." Xia Jinyuan opened the car door and let her get in first. He then got in himself. After giving the taxi driver an address, he sat down politely and stopped teasing Yi Qian. In front of others, Xia Jinyuan would never forget that as a soldier, he had to act like one. The taxi driver glanced at the man and woman sitting in the back seat, then looked again. He suddenly sighed and said, "Young man, is it difficult for soldiers like you to find a girlfriend? My nephew is also a soldier. He's already 25 or 26 years old, but he still hasn't found a girlfriend. My whole family is worried that he will really become a bachelor." So he was a soldier's family member. No wonder they could chat so well. Xia Jinyuan maintained his politeness and smiled. Sometimes, the army will organize blind dates. The leaders in the army are also very worried about the soldier's marriage. Huh? Is there really such a thing? My nephew said the same thing, and we thought he was just coaxing us. That's good, that's good. If you like her, you can bring her home. The chatting master glanced at the silent but smiling female soldier and said happily, "Your girlfriend is not bad. She's pretty, and she's a soldier like you. You have something in common." Yi Qian swallowed unnaturally. How did this master know that she was his girlfriend? "We also chose her through blind dates, so don't worry, master. Your nephew will definitely find a girlfriend. Who knows, he might even be able to bring his girlfriend home to visit his family during the new year." Major Xia felt that the taxi driver had good eyesight, seeing through his relationship with little Fox at a glance. He was in a good mood and even chatted with the taxi driver. Yi Qian rubbed his forehead. After a while, he reminded the driver implicitly, "Sir, it's raining heavily. Please drive carefully." Then he said coldly to Xia Jinyuan, "Don't talk anymore. It's easy to get distracted while driving." "Oh, you sure know how to take care of things." Yes. It's raining, so we have to drive carefully. Let's not talk about it anymore." The taxi driver laughed loudly. In the heavy rain, the car drove steadily towards their destination. Xia Jinyuan leaned over and said to Yi Qian, "The reason why the commander-in-chief is not worried about me following you is because my little Fox doesn't look like an underage girl. She looks like an adult female soldier." Chapter 741. From her face, one could see that she was young and inexperienced. From her eyes, one could see that she was tenacious and indomitable. From her words, one could tell that she was a calm and collected girl. In other words, Yi Qian did not look like an underage girl. In short, she was very reassuring. Yi Qian glanced at him coldly and said, "Are you saying that I'm a little immature?" "Sigh, I hope you're a little immature. Although you don't look like an underage girl, I can't bear to do anything to you just by looking at your face. So tender that you're oozing water." Xia Jinyuan adjusted his military cap and covered his face with his arm. There was a slightly evil expression on his face. "You still need to grow a little more." Yi Qian secretly rubbed her palms. Even if she couldn't win, she had to spar with him. Outside the taxi, it was raining heavily. Inside the taxi, there was a song that was very suitable to listen to in the rain. The singer had an ethereal voice, singing with a clear and cold, lingering voice. The taxi driver was quite in the mood, humming along and not chatting with the passengers. When they arrived at the entrance of the hotel, the bellboy had already walked over and politely opened the back door. "Welcome to Caesar Hotel. It's wet and slippery, so please be careful." The place they were staying, it was much more luxurious than the previous one. It was a 5-star hotel in the provincial capital. Even an hourly room was expensive. "Go back to your room and rest. I'll go to the pharmacy. Do you need a change of clothes?" Xia Jinyuan handed her the double room key. He did not walk her into the room. Instead, he stood at the door and said, "You need to change your clothes both inside and outside. Inside and outside clothes, including underwear and underwear." Yi Qian felt her body heat up. In her 2 lifetimes, she had never discussed her underwear with a man. After opening the door, she angrily pushed him. "I don't want to. If you keep talking, I'll go back to school right now." Although she looked fierce, she still looked like a delicate girl. He would never get tired of seeing Yi Qian like this. Xia Jinyuan knew why she was so shy, and he couldn't help but laugh. "Little fox, do you have to be shy about this? Why did you think of letting your classmates bring your luggage back to school? Go back to your room quickly. You can take a good shower before I come back, and then lie on the bed." Suddenly, he reached out and hugged her waist without any warning. Yi Qian was so frightened that he almost screamed. His vision spun again. He carried her, turned around, and carried her into the room. His tall and slender body pressed against her, pressing her back against the cold wall. He closed the door with his leg, and the room card was inserted into the electric socket. As her back pressed against the wall, the electric switch in the room was turned on. A ray of light pierced through the darkness. Yi Qian widened his eyes and saw him staring at him deeply. It was so deep, so dark, and in the deepest, darkest part of him, there was an undercurrent that made him panic. "Yi, what are you trying to do?" she asked in a panic. After a short moment of calming down, she said, "Captain Xia, don't forget what we agreed on. We agreed not to fall in love now, and we agreed not to mess around now." That's right, in Yi Qian's world, hugging and whispering sweet nothings to each other. We're all messing around. So, young Master Jun, don't mess around. He wasn't going to mess around, but when he saw how eager she was for him to leave, he couldn't help but want to tease her. Chapter 742. He fixed her in his own world and looked at her with a smile that was not a smile. His deep voice had a scorching and flirtatious taste, and it flowed by her ear with magnetism. "Are you so eager for me to leave? What should I do? The more you act like this, the more I don't want to leave. Commander-in-Chief Xia clearly reminded you before. He said, Xia Jinyuan has been a bit of a nuisance since he was young. The more you ignore him, the more he will nudge you. If you nudge him in return, he will be afraid. My little fox, how could you forget so quickly, The at the end was like a hook. It was so sexy that it was like the fallen god He. It was so seductive that one couldn't help but purse their lips and swallow their desire. His scorching gaze was fixed on Yi Qian, leaving her with nowhere to run. She could only be trapped in his world, in his arms, and there was nowhere else she could go. Yi Qian constantly adjusted her breathing, not allowing him to disturb her again and again. He always liked to attack suddenly, making it impossible for her to immediately counterattack. She could only calm down after a short period of adjustment. I didn't forget. I just wanted to remind Captain Xia that there's not much time left. It's almost 3 o'clock. I need to return to school before 7 o'clock, and you have to return to the team early. If you continue to delay like this, I might as well go back to the school's infirmary to treat my wound. No matter how intense his gaze was, she would not avoid it. Instead, she raised her head and faced this dangerous man who did not play by the rules with a stronger attitude. Now, Captain Xia, can we go to the pharmacy first? His chest was very broad and thick. She could feel his firm, mountain-like chest muscles under the military uniform. When he spoke, his chest vibrated slightly, as if even her heartbeat was vibrating with it. Her heartbeat was a little fast. No matter how many times he suddenly hugged her, her heartbeat could not be controlled. Also, this was a room with only the two of them, which made her feel even more emotional. As she adjusted her breathing, she also constantly adjusted her somewhat chaotic heartbeat. What made Yi Qian feel even more helpless was that she did not hate his embrace at all. It was too warm, too solid, and it gave her a sense of security that she trusted him. She didn't want to get too close to him, but she didn't reject his hug. She asked him to leave immediately, but she didn't show it in her actions at all. Yi Qian, who had never known what love was struggling in his heart. When he finally put his hands on Yi Qian's shoulders, he let out a long sigh and said in a muffled voice, "What do I have to do to make you let go? There's a switch on my back. It hurts my back. Her last sentence sounded a little coquettish. Not only did it not make Xia Jinyuan loosen his grip, but it also made his originally calm breathing quicken. He gently closed his eyes to suppress the undercurrent in his eyes without hesitation. Finally, he put on a sexy smile and said leisurely, "Kiss me. Kiss me, and I'll let go." Kiss him. Through his military uniform and her camouflage uniform, she could feel his body temperature. Yi Jian adjusted her breathing again and tried to make her voice sound calm. She asked him, "Where do you want to kiss me?" "Kiss where?" At this time, Yi Qian still did not understand that she should not ask a man a question that was full of hints. If she asked, it would mean that the man had the upper hand. Chapter 743. Kiss where? This was not an easy question to answer. Xia Jinyuan, who was stumped by the question, thought for a while. His sexy thin lips curled up slightly, and he leaned close to her ear. Intentionally or unintentionally, he lowered his voice and breathed heavily as he answered, "Kiss. Use your little mouth to kiss my mouth. How about that?" At this moment, Yi Qian knew that she had asked a very stupid question. Hearing his words made her eyes water due to shyness. She stood on her tiptoes without another word. At the same time, she held his handsome face with both hands and directly pressed her lips against his. Wasn't it just a kiss? So be it. Coincidentally, she didn't resist him. It was a kiss with a faint, minty scent. Her movements were particularly clumsy. Although it wasn't to the point of hurting her teeth, her soft little tongue swept around his mouth and kissed him fiercely. This kind of kiss was really a new experience, and it didn't feel bad. Xia Jinyuan took the initiative and used his tongue to dance with her, exploring the mysteries of kissing together. He pressed his lips against hers and kissed her delicately and gently. A 16 or 17-year-old girl with immature kissing skills, an immature figure, and a sweetness that made his heart pound. It was a very sweet kiss. It was their second kiss. Although the kiss was a little rough, he couldn't help but feel what it was like to kiss the person he loved. His lower body moved away from her without leaving a trace. He was a normal man. Although it was a little unkind of him to fancy a young girl, it was normal for him to have a reaction. He couldn't scare her. He had to keep a secret. Slowly releasing her, Xia Jinyuan kissed her luscious lips a few times. Second kiss, hotel. I'll remember it. Her lips were really as bright as tea. Looking at them a few more times was enough to make his heart stir again. Xia Jinyuan's eyes darkened, and he chuckled. I miss it more and more every time, and I yearn for the next kiss even more. This time, Yi Qian's legs did not turn to jelly. He slowly put down his tiptoed leg and kissed the man until his eyes were so misty that water droplets could seep out. He looked at the man who seemed to have a spring breeze between his brows and said, I've returned the favor. Captain Xia, can you leave now? She chased him away after kissing him. What a heartless little fox. However, it could also be understood that she was actually shy now. It's raining heavily outside. Don't run away because of a kiss. I still want to tell you how Uncle Chen knows about us. Xia Jinyuan let go of her waist and sighed softly. It'll be embarrassing if we go out now. Go sit down. I'm going to the bathroom. Wouldn't it be embarrassing if you went out now? Wouldn't it be too embarrassing? Yi Qian knew his breathing was heavy, and he could feel his chest heaving up and down. After he finished speaking, he couldn't help but glance at his lower body. Then, he calmly moved a few steps into the room and said calmly, I'm not in a hurry to use the bathroom. You can borrow it for the time being. Sorry, she accidentally discovered something big, but she had to pretend that she didn't know anything. She couldn't let him know that she discovered the secret of why he couldn't leave the room immediately. She wasn't an underage girl. At the very least, she was a woman who worked in medical school. She had listened in on physiology classes and learned about the normal physiological reactions of men and women. Chapter 744. Xia Jinyuan had been looking at her the whole time. Even though she glanced at his lower body and quickly looked up as if nothing had happened, he saw it all. He raised his eyebrows and joked, It seems that you know a little about what you should know. Then I won't be embarrassed. But she was embarrassed. As he spoke, Yi Qian jumped away like a rabbit and pointed at the bathroom door. Use it as you wish. Pretend that I'm not in the room. Don't be shy. I'll turn up the volume of the TV. Captain Xia was obviously embarrassed that he had found out, but he still pretended that nothing had happened. This Captain Xia was actually quite cute. If he didn't return the favor now, when would he? Not bad. His courage had increased after a while. He even knew how to tease him now, especially at a time like this. Seeing Yi Qian really turn on the TV and turn up the volume as he sat on the bed and watched the news seriously, Xia Jinyuan looked down his lower body and walked towards Yi Qian. As he walked, he smiled and said, "You're really brave. Don't you know that men are in the most danger at this time?" It was a little troublesome to have a future girlfriend who was good at fighting and was determined to be a special forces soldier. However, she was too good at fighting and her movements were too agile. In just a short while, she had already done two things. First, jump off the bed. Second, open the door and windows. She looked at him and said with a bright smile, "Captain Xia, if you dare to come over again, I'll climb out of the window and say goodbye to you next time." It seemed that he had to think about improving his fighting skills. Otherwise, how could he subdue his future girlfriend? If he couldn't help but want to have sex with her in the future, and this little fox wanted to play hide and seek with him, he really wouldn't be able to catch her. Thinking about that scene, Xia Jinyuan, who had regressed, was even more determined to improve his fighting skills. "I'm not coming over. Come down first. The rain is on your hand. Be good and coming quickly." Xia Jinyuan took a few steps back and stared at her arm. He regretted that he had forced her to open the window to get wet. Moreover, she was quite stubborn. If she said that she would jump out of the window, she would definitely jump out of the window. "Once I'm distracted by you, I don't even need to go to the bathroom. I'm going to the drugstore. Hurry and change your clothes. Be careful not to get your wound wet." Learning to restrain one's physiological reactions was also a necessary lesson for the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade. Xia Jinyuan adjusted his mood, and Yi Qian had jumped onto the window to scare him, so he did not have any reaction. Yi Qian closed the window and pulled the curtains down. Then he asked fearlessly, "So soon?" Wait. In the future, he would let her have a taste of whether it was so fast or so slow. Major Xia, whose male ability was questioned, felt the veins on his temples twitch. He left the room with an expressionless face. Sooner or later, he would have to take care of this bold vixen. As soon as the door closed, he could faintly hear the carefree laughter from inside. Major Xia, who was originally expressionless, could not help but shake his head and laugh. She was really mature one moment and childish the next. He really couldn't do anything about her. He borrowed an umbrella from the hotel and walked into the pouring rain with it. Not long after, his dark green military uniform was soaked by the rain. Even holding an umbrella was useless in the storm. Yi Qian had already pulled the curtains back. Through the glass, he watched the rain fall. His gaze was fixed on the entrance of the hotel. 5 minutes later, a familiar slender figure came into view. Chapter 745. The figure in the rain was very tall, holding a large umbrella. Even in the heavy rain, he walked calmly. One umbrella, one side of the world, walked out of the cold arrogance of being isolated from the rest of the world. This was actually also an arrogant man, but in front of her, he would be gentle and muddle-headed. Occasionally, he would say words of love that made her blush. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to escape, but he always made her heart beat faster. The rain was very heavy. It had already become a curtain of rain. But there was this person, no matter how heavy the rain was, no matter how loud the thunder was in the sky, no matter how scary the lightning was, he was willing to walk out. For the sake of her health, he was willing to go through the wind and rain. If she was not moved, it would be too fake. It was a pity that he met someone like her, who was full of secrets. Before she made up her mind, and since she was still young, she would let him think more about it. If time really treated her well, then one day, when she really opened her heart, she would definitely choose him without hesitation. As he said, she really did not like other little boys, and it was impossible for her to like them. If she really wanted to find a boyfriend, he was really her first choice. If time only gave her a chance to be reborn, but did not give her any other benefits, and she lost his love before she could really accept a relationship, then she could not blame anyone. That was her own choice, and it had nothing to do with anyone else. Looking at the tall figure who had already walked out of her sight, Yi Qian sighed softly. She, in the end, could not get over her own hurdle. She should mention it to Xia Jinyuan. It was not that she was not moved by him, but she could not get over her own hurdle. But after mentioning it, what was the use? In the end, the problem was still her, and it had nothing to do with him. If she really did mention it, it would make it seem like she was putting on an expression of, I am just like this if you love me. If you don't love me, then don't love me. Anyway, it has nothing to do with me. Thinking about it, she felt extremely disgusted. For a moment, Yi Qian, who did not even care about life or death, broke the pool of clear water because of a sudden pursuit that was completely out of her expectations. As tough as she was, she also began to worry about her gains and losses. In fact, love was about finding a balance between gain and loss. Yi Jian faced love with the mentality of I'm lucky if I get it, but it's my fate if I lose it, which happened to be a taboo in relationships. He was far less decisive than Xia Jinyuan, who acted as soon as he took a liking to someone. He did not give himself a chance to hesitate, nor did he give others a chance to take advantage of the situation. If he wanted her, he would pursue her. It was so simple and brutal. Yi Qian took a shower and washed the camouflage uniform he was wearing out of habit. He only had one set of camouflage uniform, so he washed it clean and hung it up to dry. He could wear it the next day. For example, for the past few days in the anti-chemical regiment, he washed it at night and put it on the next morning. It was impossible today. It was raining outside, and there was no place to dry. Xia Jinyuan didn't return to the hotel until his hair was dry, and he was wearing a raincoat. There are very few cars on the road because of the heavy rain. I just called your school. Since it's raining heavily, the students who are studying in the evening don't have to return to school today. They can return tomorrow morning. For the sake of the students' safety, the school was also taking some emergency measures. The students who had already returned to school had to be arranged properly, while the students who had not yet returned were informed by their homeroom teachers or acquaintances. Xia Jinyuan was a soldier who had a certain level of judgment when it came to stormy weather. When he saw such weather, the first thing he thought of was safety, so he called in advance to ask about it. Chapter 746. He stood at the door and took off his raincoat. The rainwater dripped onto the hotel carpet and soon formed a puddle of water. The raincoat was also bought at the last minute. He was still holding a new raincoat in his hand. After taking off the raincoat, Yi Qian saw that his military uniform was completely wet and clinging to his legs. Water even flowed down his pants and into his leather shoes. Pursing her lips slightly, she quickly turned around and put her raincoat in the bathroom. Then, she quickly came out of the shoe cabinet and took out the cold slippers used for showering in the hotel. Change your shoes and take off your military uniform. You also said that I needed to take a bath. You need to take a bath too. We don't have time to pay attention to our bodies during training, but we still have to pay attention to what we need to pay attention to during training. Grandpa Jin and Uncle Chun always give me a bath after I finish training according to the Miaowei medical prescription. She spoke softly. Her silky black hair was not tied up. When she bent down to take his shoes and change them for him, her silky black hair cascaded softly over her shoulders. He stood and lowered his head to look down. He could see her smooth and delicate forehead, as well as the tip of her pretty nose. Just looking at her like this, he could see her obedient and considerate side. The little fox with 1,000 faces was ruthless, but when she was soft-hearted, even an iceberg would be melted by her. The military uniform was so small that even the socks and leather shoes were the same. Before Yi Qian got into the car, she saw that the leather shoes were shiny and shiny. At this moment, they were completely wet. She was just about to take his shoes to the bathroom to pour out the rainwater inside, when Xia Jinyuan, who was bending down to take off his socks, had a huge reaction. He stopped her halfway and said in a low and hoarse voice, "I'll do it myself. Sit down and treat the wound on your hand first." His reaction was huge because as the son of a family Xia, he had never let a girl take his shoes and socks for him. Just like how Yi Qian had never let a boy buy her underwear in 2 lifetimes, the two of them were very similar in some ways. They were both clean and self-disciplined. Yi Qian looked up and was puzzled at first. When she saw the tense expression on the handsome face in front of her, she suddenly realized that this was the best opportunity to fight back. My injury isn't urgent. I've checked, and it's not bad. She raised her eyebrows high. When the corners of her mouth curled up slightly, the corners of her eyes narrowed. She really looked like a little fox ready to do something bad. Then she said, "So Captain Xia is shy? That's rare. I thought that nothing could make Captain Xia shy, but I didn't expect you to be shy just by changing your shoes." Didn't she say that she was buying underwear for her future girlfriend? What was there to be shy about? Now that it was his turn to be shy, she had to say something and let him experience how awkward she was at the time. Xia Jinyuan saw her smile and knew that he was going to be teased. When he heard her, he said helplessly, "I think it was when I was 5 years old. My clothes and shoes never went through anyone else's hands. I'm not shy, I'm just not used to it." It was better to admit that he was not used to it than to admit that he was shy. Major Xia was regretting it. Why did she make such a big fuss? What was there to be shy about? Not used to it. Yi Qian, who was smiling so much that her eyes turned into crescents, picked up his shoes and pointed at his dark socks. She said leisurely, "Captain Xia bought me clothes, but I'm not used to it either. It's only right for me to change your shoes for you, so it's better for you to get used to it. Don't make yourself feel even more awkward later." Chapter 747. I can also help you wash your pants and clothes, as long as you don't mind that I might not be able to wash them properly. Yi Qian had already decided to wash his clothes when he saw that Xia Jingrui was drenched because of her. Sometimes, she didn't know what she needed to do to express her gratitude, so she could only do something she could think of. She didn't know what it was like to be in a relationship. When she was in medical school, she saw young university students holding hands as they went in and out. Sometimes, she would see them holding hands, and sometimes they would hide in a corner and kiss. When they heard some noise, they would separate in shock. At the time, she only felt that with such good education conditions, why would they waste their time on dating? Now, even if she wanted to learn, she didn't have the chance. When Xia Jinyuan heard that she was going to wash his clothes and pants, after a short moment of awkwardness, his thin lips curled up into a faint smile. In the team, some people often say that their clothes and pants were washed by their girlfriends when they were in university. Every time I hear such a topic, I turn around and leave immediately. Why go back this time? I won't have to hide anymore. I can proudly say that my girlfriend washed my clothes and pants for me. Yi Jian could only lose if she fought with Major Xia, who had been muddling along since childhood. Hearing this, she picked up his leather shoes and went to the bathroom. "I'm just expressing my gratitude. Captain Xia, don't think too much." Yi Qian, who was used to being independent, knew how to deal with the wet shoes quickly. He poured out the water and rinsed them with warm water. Then, he took out the towel used by the hotel and wrapped it around the leather shoes. He took out the hairdryer and started drying them. In the army, soldiers often used this method to dry their leather shoes. Xia Jinyuan was 186 meters tall, so his shoe size was naturally large. In Yi Qian's hands, the shoes were as big and heavy as a boat. "It's a little difficult to dry your clothes. Let me change your clothes and change the gauze for you first." After taking off his uniform, Xia Jinyuan walked into the bathroom. As soon as he came in, he naturally handed his uniform over to Yi Qian. Yi Qian, on the other hand, naturally took his own wet uniform. Their movements were well-coordinated and exceptionally natural. The moment he walked in, the originally spacious bathroom suddenly seemed much smaller. Yi Qian couldn't help but move to the side of the sink. She then looked at him, who was completely drenched. She frowned and said in a deep voice, "I can change the gauze later. Captain Xia, you should take good care of yourself first." When it was possible to pay attention, it was better to pay attention. Don't cause all kinds of problems when you're old. Just like Grandpa Jin and Uncle Chun whenever the weather changed, their joints would hurt. It's just that I didn't pay attention when I was young. Now that I'm old, I'm suffering. Why are you so worried about my health? I'm a little flattered, he said with a smile. Then he stood in front of the mirror and started taking off his tie. He raised his slender neck, revealing his sexy Adam's apple. He said in a low voice, "You don't have to dry your shoes. They'll get wet when you go out later. You also have to dry your clothes and pants. Otherwise, you'll wet the car seat when you get in the car." Standing in front of the bright mirror, he took off his dark green tie and began to loosen the buckle. Yi Qian then realized he was so stupid that he actually stood there without moving. Chapter 748. She looked up and saw Xia Jinyuan in the mirror. He was so drenched that even his military shirt was wet. It clung tightly to his body and his chest. His mountainous chest muscles outlined the sexy lines of his body. His shirt was still tucked into his military uniform, and his belt was meticulously tightened. Not only did his already muscular waist show off his masculine charm, but it also perfectly combined sexiness and strength. Yi Qian couldn't take her eyes off him for a while. She had to admit that Xia Jinyuan's body was the most perfect and sexiest she had ever seen, especially at a time like this. Even a disciplined woman like her couldn't help but stare. She didn't want to take her eyes off him. Poor Yi Qian was still purely admiring Major Xia's body. He didn't notice that this man, who was as elegant as a cheetah, had a deep and meaningful smile in his eyes. Didn't she often see the soldiers' bodies in the army? Didn't she tell him that she was tired of looking at them? He still remembered what she said at the time. He also remembered thinking that when he had the chance, he must show this little fox the golden ratio of a real man's body. Xia Jinyuan was very confident in his own body. This was the source of a man's confidence. With confidence in his body, he could walk naturally with a masculine aura. Yi Qian was so engrossed in admiring his body that he didn't know that the man beside him was still brooding over his words. When he unbuttoned the third button, revealing his collarbone and muscular chest, Xia Jinyuan finally said slowly, "If I take off my shirt later, you won't scold me for being a hooligan, right? If you don't leave now, I'm really going to take it all off, including my pants." As he spoke, his hand was still on his belt. He looked like he was about to release it. "If I really take it off, I'm sure my body won't disappoint my future girlfriend. If you don't believe me, you can compare it with the bodies of the soldiers you've seen in the past. You can see if I'm lying." He had a teasing smile on his face as he gazed deeply at Yi Qian, who blushed easily in front of him. He watched as she pretended not to see anything as she took down a hanger and hung his military uniform neatly to dry. Then, she took down the hairdryer, picked up the towel with his shoes wrapped, and prepared to walk out as if nothing had happened. Xia Jinyuan, who was watching with great interest, held back his laughter. He took a step forward and stretched out his arm to block Yi Qian from leaving. His actions made Yi Qian's heart skip a beat. Then, he secretly prepared himself. There are bags for cleaning clothes inside. The service staff said that it's best for girls to wash their clothes before wearing them, Xia Jinyuan said gently. Xia Jinyuan said gently and let go of her arm. At the same time, he gently pushed her out of the bathroom. "I will finish my shower as soon as possible. Give me 3 minutes." These words were enough to make one's heart stop beating. If one really thought about it, it could even be related to the matters between adults. Yi Qian, whose heart and mind were in turmoil, nodded calmly on the surface. At the same time, she didn't forget to close the bathroom door for him. Everything was done calmly, and there was no trace of strangeness. But after the door was closed, Xia Jinyuan laughed in a good mood with a gloomy face. Chapter 749. Outside the room, Yi Qian pressed his forehead against the wallpaper-covered wall. Amidst his loud laughter, he groaned in pain. He did it on purpose just now. He definitely did it on purpose. He purposely stood in front of the mirror to show off his figure and said that on purpose, because she had once said that a man's figure was nothing to look at. She had seen plenty of shirtless men in the army. Such a petty man. He even remembered these casual words that she had casually said. Sigh. Even so, Captain Xiao's figure was indeed very good. After all, Yi Qian had studied in medical school before, so his professional knowledge was better than that of the students. He was very clear about body proportions, and because of this, he was amazed by his good figure. The sound of running water came from inside. Yi Qian hurriedly plugged in the hairdryer and dried the leather shoes in his hands first. There was no need to worry about the ungluing. The leather shoes given to him by the army would not come off, even if the soles of his shoes were worn flat from marching. As for the clothes in the bag, Yi Qian glanced at them several times, but did not have the courage to walk over and open it. Although she was 16 or 17 years old and not yet an adult, she was already a girl, and her feminine features had already developed. In Jiasen's words, "Jane Eyre, your chest is actually bigger than mine." Under the loose school uniform, Yi Qian did indeed have a figure that was better developed than other girls her age. After leaving Yi Jifan's house, not only did she eat well, but she also got to exercise. The 2 years after she became a girl happened to be the most crucial period of development. Sometimes, when Yi Qian took a shower, she couldn't help but mutter, "Indeed, I need to grow bigger." Therefore, when Xia Jinyuan trapped her just now, he could clearly feel that. Yi Jian's figure was so good that it was beyond his expectations under the slightly loose camouflage uniform. Then there was a man. It was normal for him to have a normal physiological reaction. The reason Yi Qian did not have the courage to open the bag was because she was wondering what kind of clothes Xia Jinyuan bought for her. As the water gradually stopped flowing, Yi Qian hurriedly straightened her face and tossed aside the messy thoughts in her mind. She was afraid that he would see the awkwardness in her heart. Xia Jinyuan came out of the bathroom in 3 minutes. He was also wearing a white bathrobe. He stood behind Yi Jian and said, "You don't have to blow-dry it. After changing the gauze, you can wash and blow-dry the clothes that you're going to wear later. You don't have to wash my clothes. I just wash them." After taking a shower, the air conditioner in the room was switched on. The man who came out of the room stood behind her with his cold breath. The faint fragrance of a shower drifted over. Yi Qian's back stiffened slightly. He sighed softly and turned around to pass the hairdryer to him. He said calmly, "It's still early. Wash your clothes and ask the hotel to send 2 hairdryers up. They can dry your clothes." There was a dry cleaning service in the hotel, but military uniforms could not be sent out for dry cleaning, even if they took off their epaulets. The military uniform represented the image of a soldier and the appearance of a country. It was not allowed to be treated casually. Yi Qian glanced at Xia Jinyuan, who looked refreshed and relaxed. She was afraid that she would start to panic again if she took another look at him. She hurriedly went around him to get the medicine she bought. "It's raining heavily, so we didn't buy a first aid kit. Remember this when you go back. Roll up your sleeves." Xia Jinyuan sat on the edge of the bed and instructed her as he took out gauze, saline, and anti-inflammatory medicine. He turned around and saw that she was trying to roll up her sleeves but was unwilling to take off her bathrobe. He couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 750. Yi Qian didn't expect that it would be difficult to roll up her sleeves after putting on the bathrobe. Yesterday, when she changed her dressing in the camouflage uniform, she easily rolled up her sleeves and tied them up. No matter how she rolled them up, the wound couldn't be seen. "Forget it. I'll change into the clothes he bought first." The sleeves of the bathrobe are thick and wide. Your wound happens to be on your arm, so it's best to remove half of the bathrobe from your shoulder. Xia Jinyuan calmly grabbed her wrist and said with a faint smile, "This is the least troublesome way. Don't tell me you're planning to change into the clothes I bought. Or change into your underwear." The last sentence was said with a slight pause on purpose, which successfully dispelled Yi Jian's thoughts of changing her clothes. She thought about how she took off all her clothes in the no man's land and laid in front of him half naked. Now, it wasn't a big deal to expose her shoulder and arm. Yi Qian wasn't a shy person. She sat sideways and pulled the large collar of the bathrobe down to her shoulder. Her skin was fair and delicate, and her slender and tender shoulders directly entered Xia Jinyuan's eyes. Xia Jinyuan wasn't in the mood to admire her at all. His gaze fell directly on the wound on her arm, and his slender eyebrows were tightly furrowed. There was blood on the bandage again, which meant that the wound had split open again. You can't train with the motor vehicle soldiers this week. The wound on your arm has already split open." He grabbed her arm with his right hand and unwrapped the cotton bandage with his left hand. He took off the bandage and looked at it. The wound had indeed split open, but there was no sign of redness or swelling. He loosened his gaze slightly and looked up to see Yi Qian's tightly pursed lips. She looked beautiful and stubborn. He used a pair of tweezers to pick up a sterile cotton ball and soaked it in saline. He gently and skillfully cleaned her wound and said in a low voice, "This is for your health. It's not to stop you from training with them. It won't be too late to go after you've recovered." Commander Liu said that your comprehension ability is beyond their imagination. Your 1 month of training is equivalent to half a year of training for others. In other words, your current results can be slowed down. Don't rush to train every day so that the male soldiers don't lose their confidence. You should at least leave some face for the male soldiers. She was still being stubborn with him, so he had no choice but to explain in detail. With one hand on his waist, Yi Qian turned to look at him and asked, "Did you tell Commander Liu that I won't be going to training for the next few days?" It turned out that he thought that she was angry at him for acting on her own initiative. Xia Jinyuan, who was very gentle with his hands, looked at the wound caused by the stray bullet in Bafong with a serious expression. He smiled faintly and said, "Training is your personal matter. I can't make decisions for you. I'm just giving you a suggestion. The final decision is still up to you." A gunshot wound wasn't just a broken skin wound. There's also a burn wound inside. So the recovery period was much slower than ordinary injuries. Coupled with the repeated cracking, the recovery was even slower. Previously, it was said that it would take about a week. Now it would take about 10 days. Yi Qian was indeed disgusted by the fact that someone else was in charge of his training. Hearing this, he felt a little embarrassed, but he still took the initiative to apologize. "Sorry, I misunderstood you just now. I thought you had already called Regiment Commander Liu. If I didn't know you well, I would definitely have called to stop the training. But I remember that you once said that you can make decisions for your own matters. Training happens to be your personal matter. I won't interfere." Chapter 751. Her quick apology made Xia Jinyuan laugh. After cleaning the wound, he put aside the tweezers in his hand and raised his eyebrows. There was a smile on his handsome face. That kind of smile instantly made Yi Jian's heart soften. His smile was very warm, and his gaze was even more like a warm current. It could tolerate her cold appearance and warm her up. The corners of her eyes were a little bitter. While she felt his warmth, her heart was filled with complicated emotions that she couldn't understand. She couldn't help but reach out and touch his handsome face. Her fingers softly stroked his elegant brows as she said in a daze, "Xia Jinyuan, what would you do if you regret it one day? What if one day you found out that the Yi Qian standing in front of you had the secret of 2 lifetimes? You came here with revenge, but because of an accident, you accidentally entered another world that broadened the stage in your heart. You changed the downfall of her previous life, the weakness of her previous life, and the misery of her previous life. If not for her previous life, how could such a Yi Qian still be the Yi Qian that Xia Jinyuan knew? She didn't like to lie, and she wasn't used to lying. Having such a secret, even though she lived a lot more freely in this life, it was still a layer of shackles that made her refuse to accept the existence of another person in her world. But she couldn't deny that the man in front of her was always concerned about her, always thinking about her, and could even hold her hand and go further together. He really did have a kind of magic that made her feel at ease. She felt so at ease that no matter how bad the outside world was, as long as he was there, she would be safe. But before she was prepared, she couldn't accept the sense of security that he gave her with a clear conscience. Xia Jinyuan saw that she was in a daze and heard what she said clearly. Although he could feel that she was hesitating, he still couldn't understand why she was hesitating. He slightly curved his lips and smiled at her. "I'm not so overcautious when it comes to relationships. The person that I like must be someone that I love willingly. As for lying, little fox, don't forget that I'm an outstanding hunter. I have a pair of eyes that are much better than Commander-in-Chief Xia's." A pair of discerning eyes. So even if you're young and underage, I still have to take action. His hands didn't stop moving as he spoke. They were very used to doing this and were very skilled at it. After a short while, he applied a new gauze and gently wrapped it with tape. Yi Qian, who was in a daze, heard him say this and narrowed her eyes slightly. She said, "Sometimes it's not enough to just look at the surface. The surface may not be true. Captain Xia, we still have time. While I'm thinking, you should think about it carefully too." Xia Jinyuan, who stood up and was about to deal with the bloodstained gauze, said with a smile, "I know very well what I want. Now, you need to think carefully." Xia Jinyuan's gaze inadvertently fell on Yi Qian's chest. Although one of her hands was tightly gripping his collar, she was in a daze just now, and her hand couldn't help but slide down. Because he stood up, she raised her head and looked at him. The curve of her chest tightened slightly, and Xia Jinyuan was able to see the most exquisite scenery. The sudden appearance of such a scene made him a little flustered. With a dark gaze, he reached out and pulled up the bathrobe that she hadn't pulled up yet. He sighed and said, "You're testing my endurance. Fortunately, I can maintain my rationality in front of your age. When you're 18, you can't test my endurance like this anymore." Chapter 752. Yi Jian, who still had something on her mind, was tricked by him. She reflexively lowered her head to see where her breasts were exposed. When she could see her round breasts, she choked and coughed. "I'm going to do the laundry." Every time something like this happened, Yi Qian could only think of running away, running as far away as possible. She couldn't stay calm in the face of something like this. Xia Jinyuan laughed so hard that his chest trembled. He said unhurriedly behind her, "I don't mind seeing something like this once in a while, especially every time I come here. Is this a benefit? To hell with your benefits." Yi Qian, who had already walked away, rushed back, grabbed a pillow from the bed, and threw it at the laughing man's face. "I was careless. Also, Captain Xia, don't you know that it's inappropriate to look at something indecent?" "I know, so I was being a gentleman and helped you pull up your collar, but you covered it with one hand and didn't let me." She was so embarrassed that she stomped her feet. Xia Jinyuan, on the other hand, was even more calm and composed. He maintained his usual aura and said, "I didn't see much, I just happened to see it." After catching the pillow that was thrown at him, Yi Qian wanted to pounce on him and bite him a few times. The phone on the bedside table that had been silent all this time suddenly rang. The monotonous ringtone made the two of them stop fooling around. This ringtone was the special ringtone for emergency calls in the unit. Xia Jinyuan's face suddenly darkened. He turned around and grabbed the phone, not forgetting to raise his hand to signal Yi Qian to go to the bathroom. As long as Yi Qian hadn't joined the Snowfield Brigade, she wouldn't be able to hear the contents of their emergency calls. Yi Qian also knew the reason for the ringtone. Seeing this, she didn't feel embarrassed anymore. She picked up the bag at the end of the bed and went into the bathroom. She turned on the water very loudly and took out her underwear and cotton underwear to wash. After Xia Jinyuan's military uniform was washed with a shower head, it hung smoothly on the rack where the sweaters were originally placed, without a single wrinkle. The water was still dripping down. Yi Qian glanced at the large bath towels that neither of them were using. Since she did not turn off the tap, she took a large bath towel and tied his military uniform together with the bath towel. She then used the towel to soak up some of the water on the military uniform. If he received such a call, he must have an urgent mission. After the call ended, he would leave immediately. The only thing she could do now was to prevent him from leaving in his military uniform that was still dripping with water. In the room, Xia Jinyuan's handsome face was cold and sharp. "Okay, I'll return to the team immediately. But now that there's a storm in Southern Province, the flight may be delayed. I'll rush back as soon as possible." After a year of secret investigation, the Snowland Brigade had killed a mercenary and a foreign soldier in the No Man's Land last year. They had found out what kind of conspiracy was behind these people. Now it was the time to make a move and give these people a ruthless counterattack. Sometimes forbearance was only for the sake of a better counterattack. In order to expose the other party in one go, one had to pretend to be forced, helpless, and submit to humiliation on the surface. In reality, no one knew what they would do. They definitely wouldn't let those with bad intentions know. The person on the other end of the phone said a few more words in a low voice before ending the call that lasted less than 20 seconds. Xia Jinyuan pushed open the bathroom door and saw Yi Qian wrapping his military uniform with a large bath towel. When she heard the noise, she turned around and smiled at him. The towel can absorb water. Put on your pants first. Even though it's still wet, at least it's not dripping anymore. Chapter 753. She rolled up a shirt with a large towel and placed it on the sink. He saw that her slender hands had turned pale because she was using too much force. He never knew that it felt so warm to have someone help him clean his uniform. Xia Jinyuan, whose eyes were as gentle as water, quietly watched her help him clean his military uniform. After she took his shirt out of the towel, she put on another big towel. Then, she squatted down and smoothed out the creases on his shirt with her hands. Although it's very wet, at least it won't drip anymore. I don't have to worry about getting the seat of the taxi wet. Her words sounded bitter, but it was the truth. Yi Qian saw that he hadn't moved and handed him his pants. Change your pants inside. I'll blow your shirt with the hairdryer. When will you book the tickets? Can the plane take off normally in this storm? Do you want to ask the hotel for the earliest flight to the capital? At this moment, Yi Qian showed a carefulness that didn't belong to her age, but it was normal for Xia Jinyuan. Children who didn't have parents to take care of them had to be more sensible. Only by taking care of themselves could they survive well. Yi Qian belonged to the former. She was a girl who could take good care of herself. He took the damp military uniform without a single drop of water. With a smile on his face, he said in a low voice, "Every time I go on a long journey, I pack my own luggage. Sometimes, I don't even have any luggage. I only have a combat uniform, a gun, and a communication device. I leave without hesitation for my beliefs. In the past, the first thing I did when I came back was to wash off the smoke and blood on my body and then have a good sleep. Now that I see you packing my uniform for me, little fox, I'm very happy." He spoke softly. Although his voice was still cold and sharp, it was much softer. "It's not too troublesome. This is good enough." Yi Qian had already lowered her eyes. The dryer in the bathroom was turned on, and Yi Qian's soft voice could be heard. "You'll have a chance. Change your pants first. I'll go out." She took the belt that was also dried with a towel from the towel rack and handed it to him along with the military pants. Then, she left with his military uniform and shirt. It didn't take much time to change into a new pair of pants. Yi Qian, who was sitting at the head of the bed, didn't even dry half his sleeves before he walked out with his sexy and muscular upper body naked. He walked straight to the bedside table, picked up his phone, and sat at the head of the bed to browse through it. "There will be a car coming to pick me up later. You can sleep in the hotel tonight and go to school tomorrow morning for morning self-study. Dinner will be settled in the hotel. Don't go out in the heavy rain." The whistling sound of the hairdryer was very loud. He leaned close to Yi Qian's ear as he spoke. His masculine scent immediately surrounded Yi Qian. Even his breath contained his scent. Such a scene should be charming and gentle, but the two of them had already restrained their thoughts. No matter how close they were, there was no ambiguity. Yi Qian placed the hairdryer in her other sleeve and turned her head to look at him with a cold and dark gaze. Even the corners of her mouth were slightly pursed. "When are you leaving?" "About 10 more minutes. That should be enough time to dry your shirt." Xia Jinyuan finished reading all the messages and deleted them. The team had already booked a ticket for him. It wasn't a flight to Beijing, but a ticket to a city near the border of China. Chapter 754. 10 minutes was enough time for the car to arrive, but it was not enough time for her to dry his shirt. Earlier on, he had said that they still had an afternoon, but in the blink of an eye, they were in a race against time. This was what it meant to be a soldier. Even if they were on vacation, they could not really relax. Urgent missions could call them back at any time. This was especially true for special operations soldiers like Xia Jinyuan. Their time did not belong to them, but to the country. Seeing her quickly shake his shirt with one hand, Xia Jinyuan's eyes gradually darkened. His tall and slender body gradually moved closer to her. He was so close that his shoulder was already pressed against her arm. Even though they were separated by a thick bathrobe, she could feel his scorching body heat. His warmth lingered on her skin. This time, I might take a little longer. When I get there, it will not be convenient for me to contact you. You can say that we have completely lost contact. You have to pay attention to the wound on your arm. It can't split open again. Gunshot wounds are different from other injuries. If you don't pay attention to them, the skin tissue will become infected. Sometimes, even a small injury can lead to high amputation. I really want to take care of you, but, little fox, this is the reality that soldiers have to accept. When the person I love needs me the most, I have no choice but to stay away from her. I don't even have a call. You said that I would be deceived, but I would also be deceiving a kind and good girl. He lowered his head and pressed his slightly cold, thin lips on her forehead. This kind of Xia Jinyuan will not be a responsible man who can stay by his girlfriend's side all the time. Therefore, this kind of Xia Jinyuan will use the simplest method to capture the girl he loves. I just want to leave the most beautiful scenery in my eyes for myself to enjoy alone. This kind of Xia Jinyuan is indeed a bastard, but he still wants to seize happiness. Don't worry, as long as you have feelings for me, we will get to know each other for a long time. Time for the two of us to get to know each other, accept each other, and stay together forever. I will love you to the point that you are the only woman in my world. I also hope that you will only see one man named Xia Jinyuan in your eyes and in your world. He reached out and turned off the hairdryer in her hand. Why waste 3 minutes on a shirt that wouldn't dry? He was more willing to hug her tightly and kiss her deeply again. Their lips were touching, and their breaths were intertwined. Yi Jian's eyes were wide open at first, but she slowly closed them. If love really came, please give her more time, so that she could accept this man that she didn't even resist kissing. After being reborn for 2 lifetimes, the hardships that God had given her in her previous life had finally become a reward for her treatment in this life. Then, would a love that she had never thought of arrive as well? She responded to him awkwardly, her hand gently but firmly placed on his chest. A strong and powerful heartbeat came from under her palm. It passed through her palm and hit her heart again. Her heartbeat seemed to have caught up with the rhythm of his heartbeat, and it was getting faster and faster. That was his heartbeat. It was also a person's weakest and most fatal spot. It was the spot that a special forces soldier needed to protect the most, and she had so easily found his fatal spot. Chapter 755. She couldn't help but think. 2 years ago, he was still secretly investigating me, but now he's going to let me kiss him whenever I want. This is the 3rd time we've kissed. Just as she was about to withdraw her hand, Xia Jinyuan, who had a premonition, raised his hand and covered the hand beside his heart with his own. He pressed down hard so that she could feel his heartbeat, as well as his nervousness and excitement when he kissed her. Their love didn't have the time to spend in front of flowers and under the moon, nor did they have the free time to be sad over the passing of autumn and the moon. If they had the time, they would have to take good care of their equally hard-won love. At a time like this, he could only seize the opportunity to kiss her. Other than that, he had to restrain himself from reaching out and hugging her. His chest was really hot, so hot that it made her tremble a little. Her other hand, that was propped up on the bedsheet, was also held by him. Their fingers were intertwined as they held it. Gradually, he exerted force on his waist, and the two of them fell onto the bed. Her heart was beating so fast. She lay on the bed and looked at Yi Qian, who still had one hand pressed against his chest and the other hand tightly held by him. She could feel the muscular man lying on top of her and saw the dark light in his eyes. She was even more nervous, and her heart was about to jump out of her chest. Xia Jinyuan's eyes darkened as he looked at Yi Qian, who was lying beneath him. Because he suddenly lay down, the loose lapels of his bathrobe opened on both sides. If one looked down from the lapels of his shirt, one could see the cleavage. Xia Jinyuan's Adam's apple gently moved. His gaze lingered on the fair skin for a few seconds before he naturally looked away. The expression on his chiseled, handsome face remained unchanged. He didn't move again. Instead, he stood up and picked up the shirt beside the bed. After the kiss, his voice was slightly hoarse as he said, "This is the third time. For the third kiss, he would remember it." Yiqian pursed her lips slightly. Her dark and bright eyes watched him put on the half-dry shirt that was still warm from the hairdryer. He tucked the shirt into his trousers and tightened his belt. In the blink of an eye, his military uniform looked neat and cold. Xia Jinyuan put on a damp jacket and a similarly damp military cap. At this time, Xia Jinyuan was no longer the gloomy light in his eyes that made her panic. Instead, he was a cold soldier who was about to carry out a dangerous mission. This kind of Xia Jinyuan made her feel very relieved. After everything was packed up, Xia Jinyuan looked at his little fox and said, "Wait for me to come back." His words were simple and concise. After he finished speaking, he turned around, leaving behind the gentleness of a soldier. There was no trace of gentleness left. Yiqian, who had already calmed down, looked at him as he opened the hotel room door. She slowly said to him word by word, "I hope you all come back safely." The major left without looking back. He merely paused in his steps and nodded gently in response to her words. For her, for his family, and for the country that nurtured them, of course he had to come back safely. She hadn't asked him when he had told Uncle Chun about their relationship. She had thought that they still had a few more hours, but when she heard the sound of the door being locked, she realized that they didn't have much time to spend together. Not much time at all. After thinking about it, Yiqian didn't even change out his bathrobe. He simply pulled out the key card, casually closed the door, and chased after the major. Chapter 756. When they were carrying out the mission in Bafong, the members of the Shuiyu Brigade who were in charge of guarding the perimeter had secretly watched their comrades leave. Now, she also had to watch Xia Jinyuan, a comrade who had fought side by side on the battlefield, leave. She ran very quickly. When she reached the elevator, she realized that one of the two elevators was still going up, while the other was already on the 5th floor. Without hesitation, she turned around and ran towards the fire escape. Once again, she was thankful for the habit she had developed from being hunted down by Ying in her previous life. No matter where she was used to observing the escape and fire escape. That's why she ran straight to the fire escape without wasting another minute. The slippers on her feet were kicked away by Yi Jian because she did not run down the stairs. Instead, she jumped. With one hand on the handrail, she jumped down several floors in a seemingly relaxed manner. However, it was a leap that ordinary people would not dare to do. In the blink of an eye, she had already descended several floors. Rushing out of the fire stairs, the group of guests who were about to take the elevator were shocked. Just imagine, a person wearing a white bathrobe running without making a sound, and his speed was as fast as a gust of wind. In an instant, only a white shadow could be seen floating past. How could people not be shocked by such a haunting scene? What kind of management is this? The old man is about to have a heart attack. A sharp female voice came from beside Yiqian. Since he was focused on chasing after her, Yiqian didn't pay much attention to the voice. He only had one thought in his mind. Why does it sound so familiar? He ran all the way to the lobby, just in time to see the tall and imposing figure walking out of the revolving glass door of the lobby. There was a car parked outside. As he walked out, the hotel doorman standing by the car door immediately opened the back door, bowed politely, and invited him to get in. Yiqian didn't chase after him. Instead, he stood at a spot where he might be able to see him get into the car. He quietly watched him leave, just like the members of the Snowfield Brigade who were hiding in the dark in Pakistan. After saying, "Thank you," Xia Jinyuan was about to get into the car and leave when he suddenly stopped and turned around. Through the glass revolving door, he saw the person who was supposed to be in the room standing in the lobby in a white bathrobe, silently sending him off with her eyes. She was barefoot because he didn't hear her running. She also ran over from the fire elevator and even jumped down continuously because there were only two elevators. One went up, and the other came down from the elevator. She looked at the man who was about to get into the car, but stopped when he felt her gaze. The rain was gloomy, and the hotel turned on all the lights outside. They were bright and warm, standing under the warm orange light. The man's figure was as straight as a peach. Under the big brimmed hat, his face was handsome and sharp. There was a smile on his flawless, handsome face. There was also a smile in his eyes that were as bright as the North Star. Yi Qian also smiled slightly. His eyes curved into crescents. It was a warm smile. He understood why she had run over, and she smiled because he understood her intentions. The two of them only looked at each other for 3 seconds. Xia Jinyuan moved his lips and said something. Then he bent over and got into the car. He seemed to say something to the doorman, but because he was bent over, Yi Qian didn't see it. She only heard him say, "Take care of yourself." He didn't say anything else. It was because he didn't have time to say anything else. Chapter 757. The car left the hotel entrance and drove into the rain. The hotel attendant in the lobby jogged over with a pair of cotton slippers. Xia Jinyuan had instructed the hotel doorman to bring Yi Qian a pair of cotton slippers. Someone walked over aggressively from behind. Yi Qian, who had just put on the slippers, said, "Thank you," to the attendant. When he sensed that something was wrong, he immediately turned around and shielded the attendant behind him. The person seemed to be coming for her, but since the hotel attendant was there, he wasn't sure. He instinctively shielded the attendant behind him. "Where's your boss? Tell him to come out immediately." She was wearing a dark purple dress that was obviously expensive, with a cashmere shawl draped over her shoulders. She was wearing high heels, and her temperament was just as domineering as her words. Yi Qian looked at her. A trace of surprise flashed across his cold face. No wonder the voice sounded familiar. It was an old friend. Her aunt, Yi Zhixiang, used to drive an imported luxury car back to the village to visit her relatives. It was said that she owned several large companies. The last time she saw Yi Zhixiang was when she had just turned 18. She ran to Yi Zhifan's house to get an ID card. She happened to see Yi Zhixiang and her husband, who was blind in his right eye, enter the house. She was so scared that she ran out as fast as she could. There was only one thought in her mind. If she ran any slower, she would be beaten to death by her uncle. At the time, she was really scared. She would always remember how cruel her uncle was to her. When she was still in the 4th grade of elementary school, her uncle, Sun Yaozu, beat her until she fainted and threw her into the snow on the night of Chinese New Year's Eve. When she saw her uncle, she was reminded of what had happened in the 4th grade. She didn't even dare to ask for her household register and ran as fast as she could. Now, she hadn't seen Yi Zhixiang for 11 years. When she looked at her again, she could recognize her at first glance. She wasn't much younger than Yi Zhixiang when she was 18. It was obvious that her aunt was good at taking care of herself. Yi Qian looked at her calmly and chuckled. "I'm a guest of the hotel. I don't need my boss to interfere with what I do here. Also, who are you? I don't think you're qualified to meet my lord." The hotel staff immediately stood up and asked with a smile, "Hello, sir. If you need any help, you can contact any of our hotel staff." When the staff came forward, Yi Qian smiled at her and headed straight for the elevator. So what if Yi Zhixiang was a blood-related aunt? Yi Qian never owed her anything, so it didn't matter whether he acknowledged it or not. Grandpa Jin had once said, "You live your life, and they live theirs. Mind your own business." From this, she could tell that Grandpa Jin didn't want her to have anything to do with Yi Zhixiang's family. As for why, she didn't know and didn't want to know. On the other hand, Yi Zhixiang was slightly stunned when she saw Yi Qian. Why did this girl look so familiar? Especially the way he spoke just now. Why did he sound so familiar? It was as if he had seen it somewhere before, but he just couldn't remember where. He was only stunned for a moment before he saw the rude girl walk past him and swagger away. "Stop right there." When Yi Zhixiang saw this, she glared at the staff and ran after Yi Qian in her high heels. Where did this girl come from? She's so rude. She scared my old man, and he's still complaining about angina. She didn't even apologize. Chapter 758. Yi Qian didn't really know what kind of person Yi Zhixiang was, so when she suddenly shouted, she was stunned. They had only met twice in her past life, and each time was very unpleasant. Even if she didn't know her well, she didn't have a good impression of this unfamiliar aunt. Now that she shouted, Yi Qian's mind flashed with the image of a wrinkled, kind-looking old lady who didn't love her granddaughter at all. Yi Zhifan's mother, her and Yi Ying's grandmother. Back then, why did she choose to live with Yi Zhifan's family? Half of the reason was because she and Yi Ying didn't have much status in front of their grandmother. She treated them all the same. However, she took extra care of her aunt's two sons, especially the son who took her aunt's surname. She took very good care of him. Those memories that were hidden deep in her mind, memories that she couldn't remember without a trigger, suddenly came back one by one. They were all bad memories of the Yi family, memories that she was afraid of when she was young. Ignoring Yi Zhixiang's shouting, Yi Qian walked to the front desk and put the room card on the marble counter. She said to the lobby manager, "Let me see my registration information." Yi Zhixiang was stunned for a moment. Maybe she saw that she looked familiar, but she didn't remember now. Maybe she would remember later. If she ran to the front desk to check her information, she had to make sure that Captain Xia's information wasn't leaked. The lobby manager originally wanted to come over to appease the guests, but when he saw the young lady on the other side looking at the information, he looked at the room card and said respectfully, "This is the hotel's VIP room. Your registration information is that of a Ms. Xia." "Ms. Xia? Who is that?" "Okay, thank you. As long as it wasn't Captain Xia, it would be fine." As for who Ms. Xia was, there was no need to care. There was a hint of coldness in her indifferent expression. She slightly restrained her gaze and said indifferently, "Also, someone will ask me about the situation here later. I hope that your hotel can abide by the basic rules of the service industry and keep the identity of any guest strictly confidential." The information of VIP members naturally had to be kept confidential. After the lobby manager saw the information, he gave up on the idea of looking for the parent of this little girl who was probably still a student. In the southern province, in this hotel, the VIP members were either the boss's friends or people that even the boss had to bow to. He hurriedly agreed and got another staff member to personally escort Yi Qian to the elevator. Only then did he come over to appease the other customer who was extremely angry. As for how the hotel would handle this matter, Yi Qian had no idea. When he returned to the room that still smelled like Xia Jinyuan, Yi Qian walked in the bathroom with a calm expression and washed his unwashed underwear. The bra was a light pink with a little wavy. It was a girly bra with a strong girly style. As for the size, Yi Qian could not help but purse his lips. He had never touched it before, so how could he tell? Even through the clothes, he could tell with his eyes. She was very sensitive to numbers, distances, and sizes, but when she saw his lower body, as she thought about it, she suddenly blushed. First, there was a faint color on her jade-like face. Then, there was a light pink color, like the sharp petals of a peach blossom. It was so delicate and tender that one could not help but want to pluck it. Xia Jinyuan was able to keep this kind of person in his arms, but he was still able to keep calm and maintain his gentlemanly demeanor. She really had to praise his endurance. Chapter 759. Probably because she suddenly thought of an unspeakable and unpredictable size, Yi Jian felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She stood in front of the sink in a daze. Then he patted his forehead with his hands soaked in soap bubbles. Calm down, calm down. Don't let your imagination run wild. Don't let your imagination run wild." Then he looked into the mirror and saw himself in it. His face was rosy and his eyes were watery. His entire body was so tender that water could be squeezed out of it. He was so enchanting that even he himself was stunned. This was a new version of himself. Yi Qian's eyes widened for a few seconds, then he immediately splashed cold water on his face. The person in the mirror was no longer himself. He couldn't even recognize himself. How could she have such an expression? Where did the coldness in her eyes go? Where did the sharpness in her eyes go? Yi Qian washed until his hair was wet and felt the heat on his face dissipate. Only then did he dare to look at himself in the mirror. After a long time, Yi Qian nodded in satisfaction. He didn't dare to let his imagination run wild. He quickly washed the clothes he was going to wear tomorrow and dried them with a hairdryer after the water had dried. In room 808 on the 8th floor of the hotel, Yi Qian said to the old woman lying on the bed, who was also Yi Qian's grandmother, "Mom, I saw a very familiar girl just now. She's the one who scared you. Now that I think about it, why do I feel like she looks a little like Sun Xueqing? Do you think this girl is a bastard left behind by Big Brother's family?" In the Yi family, the head of the family was old Madame Yi. When she was young, she was very powerful. She looked like she was all smiles, but in reality, she wasn't simple. After she quietly took over Big Brother's family's property, she even gained a good reputation in the village. As for the old man of the Yi family, he was also a ruthless person when he was young. He didn't hesitate when he took over Big Brother's family's property. He didn't even put on a show. The two elders shared a room, but the old man was playing mahjong with his son-in-law and his son-in-law's subordinates in the other room. Hearing this, old Madame Yi opened her eyes. She was in her 60s, but because of her plump appearance, she looked like she was in her 50s. "There's no message from your brother. We'll know when he comes over and asks. There are many similar people in this world. You don't have to make a fuss. It's just a similar person. Don't make things difficult for yourself." The old lady's voice was soft and amiable. She even had a hint of a smile on her face. But when she saw Yi Zhixiang's respectful expression, she knew that this old lady wasn't as friendly as she looked. Although she looked plump, her eyes were filled with ferocity that shouldn't be present in an elderly person. "Mom, you're used to seeing storms and storms, so of course you can keep your composure. I can't. When I see that girl's face, I hate her," Yi Zhixiang said through gritted teeth. Her nails were broken by her. Yaozu's right eye. Old Madame Ye's face was still full of smiles, but at this moment, her face darkened and she said in a low voice, "It's been more than 10 years. Are you afraid that other people don't know about your family's affairs? Are you so eager to give it away the moment you come back? What's wrong with your right eye? It's just that you got injured at work and the factory paid a sum of money. That's why your family can live a good life. Remember it well." With a cold shout, Yi Zhixiang suppressed the unwillingness on her face. She had no choice but to suppress her unwillingness. There was no other way. Chapter 760. Old Madame Yi looked at her aggrieved daughter and couldn't help but say, "He's gone now. What are you still upset about? Your brother is taking care of that child. Are you still worried about him? He raised a piece of trash. What's there to be upset about? Don't give me a hard time the moment you return to Nan Province. I'm already so old and I still smile every day. Why are you so angry? Son-in-law, you have a big family now. As a rich wife, you only need to remember 3 things. First, protect your 2 sons. Second, protect your family's money. Third, dress yourself up." Old Madame, you didn't even mention her one-eyed son-in-law, Sun Yaozu. There was nothing to mention. A woman didn't live for a man, especially someone like Sun Yaozu, who couldn't protect himself. He was rich and spent his time outside. If he wasn't having an affair with an actress, he was having an affair with a model. Old Madame Yi wouldn't persuade her daughter to stay with such a man forever. Money and her son were the most important things to her. Yi Zhixiang wanted to say something, but when she saw the smile on old Madame Ye's and Tuan's faces, she held back her anger. She took out an exquisite phone and dialed a number. The phone signal didn't seem to be very good in the heavy rain. After Yi Zhifan said a few words, he hung up because the signal wasn't good. He turned to look at his wife and said with an unhappy expression, "My mother is staying at Caesar Hotel now. My sister is there too. How can you two not go over and talk to her? Also, you have to explain to my mother about Yi Qian. Otherwise, we won't be able to live a peaceful life. As for the past, you know Sun Dongqing. Ying didn't want to go because in her memory, the grandmother who wasn't close to her didn't have much affection for her. As for Sun Dongqing, she didn't want to go. First, she didn't want to face an old woman who always found fault with her. Second, she didn't think of old Madame Yi as her mother-in-law. As for the reason, Ying didn't know, but she knew. She pulled the corner of her mouth and said coldly, "It's raining so heavily. Even a car can't drive. I'm surprised that the old woman thought of letting us take Ying to see her in the rain. Why didn't you live with Yi Zhixiang? Why did you come back to the southern province?" As she spoke, she became even angrier and complained. "Every time she comes back, she only stays in the provincial capital. It doesn't matter when she comes back. My heart aches for you. No matter when, as long as this old woman says something, you will go." That year, it was snowing heavily. She came by plane, but what about you? The snow was so heavy that the roads in the mountains were blocked. How many roads did you take to get out? Old Yi, I'm feeling indignant on your behalf. No matter how stupid Sun Dongqing was, she was still on Yi Zhifan's side. This was also the reason why Yi Zhifan did not change his wife, even though he was promoted. When he was young, he couldn't make the decision. It was the old woman who made the decision to marry her. He originally thought that she would be restless and find trouble for him. Who knew that not only was his wife beautiful, but she also worked hard for him. Even when the old woman secretly used force, she bore it by herself. She even secretly saved the food from her mouth for him. So many years had passed. Even if she wasn't clean outside, she had never thought of getting a divorce because of what had happened when she was young. She didn't have any feelings for him, but she was still on his side. Hearing this, Yi Zhifan sighed. He looked at his muddle-headed daughter and said softly, "My mother has always wanted to save face. Just go with the flow and wait for her to leave." Chapter 761. Sun Dongqing did not have a good impression of her mother-in-law at all. Hearing this, her face turned even colder. "I will never forget what that old woman did back then. She wants to keep up appearances her whole life. Does that mean my reputation is not worth it?" Reputation? I can only blame myself for being too stupid back then. I mistook her for my own mother. I didn't take any precautions and ended up like that. The more agitated Sun Dongqing was, the more her eyes were filled with hatred. It was so deep that she could kill someone immediately. That good sister of mine clearly knew that old woman was a scoundrel. She only mentioned it to me a few times and never reminded me again. There are only two people I hate in this life. One is Sun Xueqing, and the other is that old hag. Ying was even more confused. She thought to herself, "Mom is clearly afraid when talking about Grandma in private, but she's not afraid at all in front of Dad? Also, why did she hate Yi Jian's mother, her aunt, so much? What exactly happened here? I can go, but Ying can't go. I don't want our precious daughter to suffer in front of that old hag. It's the holidays. I wonder if Yi Zhixiang's two sons have returned to the southern province? If they were there, Ying would have no place there. I don't know how biased that old thing is. I can tolerate other things, but I can't tolerate that for the rest of my life. If Ying had a younger brother or sister to help her, she wouldn't have been bullied by Yi Qian to the point where she couldn't even go to school. Ying wouldn't have been our only child." Thinking about the past, Sun Dongqing's eyes turned red. Even Yi Zhifan clenched his fists and fell silent. This matter was also a headache for Yi Zhifan. However, no matter how painful it was, he could only endure it. Only old madam, Yi could do something like cutting off an heir. Back then, Sun Dongqing gave birth to Yi Ying. Coincidentally, the country's one-child policy allowed for one child. After Yi Ying was born, old madam Yi often scolded her for cutting off the Yi family's bloodline. Sun Dongqing was young and naive. She really cut off the Yi family's bloodline by herself. It was only when Yi Zhifan secretly said that she would hide outside for a few years and give birth to a son that she felt better in her heart. In the end, the truth was so cruel that Sun Dongqing almost committed suicide. A few years later, when she was not pregnant, she went to the hospital for a checkup. However, she was told that she was permanently sterilized and could not have children in this lifetime. The couple was struck by a bolt from the blue. They did not know how many years they had been infertile because they had been sterilized. You don't have any scars from the second surgery on your stomach. There's only one possibility. It was done together with the cesarean section. How could you not know? Who was the one who signed off on the operation? The doctor's words were like a clap of thunder. That was all he could remember. At that time, Sun Dongqing was still young. When she knew that she couldn't have another child, It was as if the sky had collapsed. She was in a trance and didn't even look at her husband's expression. When she returned home, she was lying on her bed, crying when she heard the sound of an argument coming from the living room. It was Yi Jifan's furious questioning. The old woman said lightly, "Your wife was timid and did not dare to give birth. She asked for a cesarean section. I thought she was a pitiful person. Coincidentally, the doctor asked if we should comply with the country's one-child policy. I thought that since she cherished her life so much, we should do it." She sighed again and said in a considerate tone, "Nowadays, men and women are the same. Why do you have to give birth to a boy? I know that you are filial and do not dare to cut off the Yi family's bloodline. I discussed with your father. When your sister's second child is born, his surname will be Yi." Chapter 762. Hearing this, Sun Dongqing realized that it was her mother-in-law who made the decision to get the doctor to perform a ligation operation on her. What was even more hateful was that the old thing sounded as if she was being considerate of her. Why didn't she think about why she was so scared? It was because the old thing had told her every day when she was pregnant that giving birth to a child was extremely dangerous. If she was unlucky, she would lose her child. She also said that there was a cesarean section that didn't hurt at all. After the anesthetic was administered, the child would be by her side when she opened her eyes again. It was because of this that she decided to have a cesarean section. If she had known about this, she wouldn't have chosen to have a cesarean section. She hated herself for being so grateful to the old thing back then. In order to please the old thing, she went against Sun Xueqing. Thinking about the past, Sun Dongqing was already in tears. Yi Jifan naturally thought about those things too. At this moment, he was also holding back his tears. But what was the use of saying it now? Back then, the old woman was ruthless and didn't leave any traces. Before Sun Dongqing's cesarean section, everyone in the village knew that as a mother-in-law, she didn't want her daughter-in-law to suffer and was willing to spend more money for a cesarean section. Whenever this was mentioned, all the daughters-in-law in the village would be envious. But who would have thought that the woman who spent money on a cesarean section had such a vicious heart? At that moment, the atmosphere in the room was particularly heavy. Ying looked at the time and said softly, "Dad, why don't we listen to Mom? I'm not going. Anyway, Grandma doesn't like me." "Ying, it's better if you go. Grandma hasn't seen you for a few years and misses you." Yi Jifan didn't agree. He said to Sun Dongqing, "You know my mom's temper. If you don't go today, she can come to my office when the time comes." Sun Dongqing's eyes were red with hatred. In the end, she compromised and said fiercely, "We can't let Ying go alone. We have to get Yi Qian, that wretched girl, here." "Do you think that's possible?" Yi Jifan snorted and glanced at his nervous daughter. "You should think about how to talk about Yi Qian. Grandma will ask." Ying wanted to ask what happened back then, but she didn't dare to do so now. In the hotel, Yi Jixiang kept looking at the time. However, only 10 minutes had passed, and she said impatiently, "Why isn't she here yet? Is she not coming? Mom, why don't you call her? My brother listens to you." "Listens to her?" A smile appeared on old Madame Ye's face as she said, "Jixiang, your brother's career in the government has been extraordinarily smooth these past few years. I was afraid that I would have to ask him for help in the future. This brother of yours is smarter than your elder brother, who died long ago. He's also cunning. Now that he's the head of the office, he won't listen to his mother's words like he used to." But old Madame Yi paused, and the smile on her face faded a little. "But no matter how hard his wings are, he still has to respect me, his mother." Yi Jixiang was relieved. Her mother had always been the head of the household. Sometimes, Sun Yaozu would ask the old lady for advice. Even though her old mother was a rural woman, she was a young lady from the old society. If it weren't for her grandfather being a capitalist and going bankrupt during the Great Revolution, she wouldn't have married into the Yi family, which had been poor farmers for several generations. After waiting for about half an hour, Yi Jifan knocked on room 808 with his wife and daughter when the smile on Yi Jifan's face was almost gone. Chapter 763. When old Madam Yi saw the family of three, she smiled like a bodhisattva in the temple. It must have been tough for you to come on such a stormy day. I was worried that something might have happened on the road, so I prayed for you to come here safely. As she spoke, she closed her eyes and put her palms together and chanted, Amit Ba. At this moment, she held Yi Ying's hand and sighed. I know you are filial, but you can't bring the child out to take risks. If something happens and the child gets hurt, you too will regret it. It sounded like she was really thinking for Yi Jifan's family of three. However, if one listened carefully, it sounded like she didn't want the family of three to come, but they insisted on coming to fulfill their filial piety. If something happened, it would have nothing to do with her as an old lady. Yi Ying felt as if her hands were wrapped around by a snake. They were icy cold, without a trace of warmth. The smile on her face was a little stiff, but her voice was still delicate. She said affectionately, Grandma, don't worry. My dad drives steadily. The rain is a little heavy, but as long as he drives slowly, it will be fine. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken so long to come here. When she said that, old Madam Yi couldn't help but look at Ying again. She tightened her grip and said calmly, You're all grown up now. You know how to coax me. You're my grandma. If I don't coax you, who else can I coax? Ying smiled and sat on the edge of the bed together. She even intimately rested her head on old Madam Ye's shoulder. It looked like the relationship between the grandmother and granddaughter was really good. Son Dongqing couldn't smile along. She was secretly hating her so much that her teeth itched. She smiled insincerely and said, Mom, look at what you're saying. When you came, you even asked sister-in-law to call us. You picked the right time, too. It was raining heavily. Since you're back, how could we dare to neglect you? Even if there was a flood on the road, we still had to come. 1 year, when you came back, the mountain was blocked by heavy snow. When Jifan found out, he walked for a few hours in the snow. From then on, every rainy day, his knees hurt so much that I, your wife, cry. We haven't seen each other for a few years. Second sister-in-law, you've become quite eloquent. I didn't know that you were so eloquent like eldest sister-in-law. That's not strange. After all, they're sisters, Yi Zhixiang said with a smile. They had just met, but they were already fighting. Yi Zhifan first greeted old Madam Yi, then said calmly, Your second sister-in-law used to think that my younger sister was young and insensible, so she let you have your way. Now, I'm almost 40 years old. If your second sister-in-law still gives in, others will laugh at me. Was he helping his wife to deal with her, his younger sister? I'm different now that I'm a high-ranking official. I can still speak like an official in front of my younger sister. Mom, why don't you tell me that no matter how high his position is, he is still a child in front of you? Yi Zhixiang wasn't someone who was afraid of causing trouble. She directly brought up old Madam Yi in order to suppress her brother's arrogance. What a great official's prestige. 2 years ago, he didn't even dare to boast in front of her. Now, it was just like what her mother had said. He was getting more and more powerful, and his wings had hardened. Old Madam Yi persuaded the two children to bicker. She smiled and said, All right, I know you two have a good relationship. When you were at home, you always liked to bicker. Now that you've grown up, you're still the same. As a brother, it's only right that I give in to my younger sister. She then frowned and said, Where's Yi Qian? Why isn't he here? Why? Does this girl think she's so important that she doesn't even come to see her grandmother? Chapter 764. At the mention of Yi Qian, Sun Dongqing's arrogance immediately disappeared. She looked at her husband uneasily. What is it that you have to hide from me? When old Madam Yi saw this, the smile on her face disappeared. Her originally amiable expression instantly turned cold. You guys talk. I'm listening. Yi Zhixiang also stopped arguing. She sat down on the chair and asked sternly, What exactly happened? That was a long story. Yi Zhifan spent about 15 minutes to finish telling her what happened in the past few years. The army moved her out of the household register. At that time, I was just a mayor. I didn't have the power to stop it. As for now, it should be even more impressive. Unyielding was originally in the provincial first high school, but she had no choice but to transfer schools during this military training. There's also one more thing. She only repeated for a month before entering the provincial first high school. She skipped the first year of high school and skipped to the second year of high school. This child is like sister-in-law, not like her brother. Yi Jifan told her everything, no matter how big or small. He didn't exaggerate or leave out anything. Even if I'm the office director now, I wouldn't dare to touch Yi Jian. I'm afraid she has someone supporting her from the army. I don't want to hide this from you. I originally wanted to see if I could find some clues before telling you. Unfortunately, I still haven't found out who is behind her. Old Madame Ye's face darkened when she heard this. She can cause trouble at such a young age. She is indeed like her mother. She sneered. There's someone behind the army? She's just a girl. What can she have in the army? Before he could say the word human, he suddenly stopped talking. It wasn't that there was no one. Old Man Jin was in the army. It was said that Sun Xueqing joined the army because of him. But Old Man Jin had been retired for decades. What could he do? The eldest brother's entire family was dead, leaving behind a lass who couldn't even be helped. What kind of waves could she stir up? However, she couldn't let her guard down. After hearing what happened in the past few years, this useless girl had made a name for herself. After thinking about it, old Madame Yi smiled. Where is she now? I asked Yao Zhu to bring someone to invite her over. As her grandmother, I haven't seen her for a long time. As her aunt, I often miss her. It's better for her to come over. As soon as she finished speaking, Yi Jixiang, who had been listening without saying a word, said coldly, Mom, I was just talking about the girl in the hall. Don't tell me she's the wretched girl. The more I think about it, the more I think it's her. Her facial features were the same as Sun Xueqing's. Even the way he looked at others was full of himself. I can't wait to gouge her eyes out with my hands. The thick viciousness caused Yi Ying, who was secretly laughing with her lips pursed, to shiver involuntarily. What did eldest aunt's family do to make youngest aunt hate them so much? When Sun Yaozu came over, Ying was so scared that she did not dare to sit next to old Madame Yi. He was short, but his body was very strong. He was wearing a gray shirt and a pair of black trousers. He was dressed like a boss, but his fierce aura made it obvious that he was not a good person. When he saw Yi Jifan's family, he smiled and greeted them, second brother, second sister-in-law. Then he said, Mom, isn't it just a girl? Jixiang said she might be in the hotel. I've already sent someone to ask for the room number. No matter who it is, they'll bring her over in less than 5 minutes. Chapter 765. In terms of style, he did have the right to be arrogant. However, this was Southern Province, and the Caesar Hotel was not an ordinary 5-star hotel. The boss behind the scenes was not an ordinary person either. Xia Jinyuan had used a VIP card to get the room, so the hotel could not casually reveal their client's information. A few men surrounded the front desk with a strong attitude. The lobby manager tried to calm them down while calling Yi Qian. At the same time, he also reported to the hotel manager to prevent the situation from escalating. What was Yi Qian doing? He was using a hairdryer to dry his underwear in the room. After receiving the call, Yi Qian smiled and said, I got it. Also, please send dinner up. Thank you. If he really wanted to come to their door, he would have to have the strength to fight. In her previous life, she was afraid of Sun Yaozu. In this life, there is no need for her to be afraid. Xia Yiwei also received a call from the hotel boss. She was still in the office and had not gotten off work yet. When she heard this, she said with interest, Young Master Ho, do you need to ask me about such a small matter? You are a well-known figure in the underworld. You can handle such a small matter. It's rare for my brother to use my card. It can be seen that he intended to bring her to young Master Ho's hotel and wanted to protect that little girl. Young Master Ho, do as you see fit. I am still in the office, so let's talk later. As the secretary of the Southern Province Governor, Xia Yiwei was polite to everyone. However, when she spoke to the boss of the Caesar Hotel, young Master Ho, she felt a little sarcastic. When the call ended, the man sitting in the car laughed. As the boss of the Caesar Hotel and a well-known figure in the underworld, Only Xia Yiwei would dare to hang up on him like this. He said to the driver, "Find out who is causing trouble on my turf. Bring some men with guns and give them a warning." In the underworld, the way to deal with troublemakers was very direct. It was also the best way to control the situation. Sun Yaozu knew that this hotel was not a place where he could be arrogant. He was also a member of the underworld, so he knew when to stop and did not have a trace of dissatisfaction. After closing the door, he smashed a few glasses in the hotel and said to old Madame Yi with a vicious expression, "Mom, when can I avenge my eye? I've been waiting for more than 10 years. She's in the hotel. If you want to gouge her eyes out, I won't stop you." Old Madame Yi wasn't afraid of her son-in-law at all. She smiled and said, "I didn't expect him to become a scourge either. I originally wanted to borrow your second brother's hand to raise him into a good-for-nothing so that I could give you and Ji Xiang an explanation, who knew that your second brother wasn't a capable person and instead raised a promising scourge." When he said this, Yi Jifan and his family did not leave. Hearing this, Yi Ying's heart skipped a beat. Only then did she realize that her uncle's blindness really had something to do with Yi Qian. No, it wasn't Yi Qian. It had something to do with Aunt. She didn't know about such a good thing until now. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have been in such a hurry to attack Yi Qian. Just let uncle's family take action. When Sun Yaozu heard this, he stared at Yi Jifan and said fiercely, "Second brother, at that time, you promised that you would raise that girl right under your nose and not let her have a bright future. What do you think we should do now? Her mother blinded me. If I don't blind her daughter's eyes, who will I seek revenge from? I won't stop my brother-in-law from taking revenge. She's in the hotel. Just like Mom said, if you're not afraid, you can go over now." Yi Jifan wasn't afraid of his brother-in-law anymore. He was a government official and had people secretly protecting him. Did he need to be afraid of a fugitive? Chapter 766. Back then, Sun Yaozu looked down on Yi Jifan. Now that he had made a fortune, he naturally looked down on him even more. However, Yi Jifan was no longer the same as before. He was already an office director. From the deputy mayor to the office director, Yi Jifan used less than 3 years to get there. This speed of promotion was also the reason why his far-sighted mother-in-law decided to come back and take a look. Fast, too fast. At this rate, wouldn't it only take 3 to 5 years for him to become a mayor and a governor? His business was big now, but he didn't have a strong background. He relied on money to get things done outside. In addition, he had an identity that couldn't be exposed. Although his family was rich, it was always his mother-in-law who showed up outside. Even the chairman of the company was his mother-in-law. Moreover, all the accounts were in the names of his mother-in-law, father-in-law, and wife. There was no other way. He couldn't show up at all. As a fugitive, he couldn't call himself a boss outside and couldn't interact with government officials. It was even more impossible for him to interact with the judicial department. Thinking of this, Sun Yaozu, who originally wanted to drink it back, instantly changed his expression. He patted his stomach and laughed. "Look at what second brother is saying. Mother has already spoken. I have to listen to her. Moreover, this little girl has a second brother looking after her. Why would I be worried? We didn't come back this time for this little girl. Mother said that second brother's position is getting bigger and bigger. It's a happy occasion for the Yi family. We must come back to congratulate second brother." As she spoke, she gave Ji Xiang, whose face was still dark, a look. "Ji Xiang, take out the gifts we brought for Brother Tingrui. It's raining so hard, so Brother Tingrui shouldn't go home tonight. Stay at the hotel. Father is still playing cards in the next room. Tonight, we'll play with him." Old Madame Yi smiled with gratification. It's right for a family to be harmonious. Brothers and sisters should support each other. Today, you helped me, so I'll help you in the future. The family's days will be better if we live in harmony. That's right. Although Mother is living with us, she always talks about second brother and his second sister-in-law. He often sighs and says that he misses Ying. I wonder how tall Ying has grown. His nagging is like chanting scriptures. It gives me a headache. Yi Jixiang saw that old Madame Ye's attitude had changed. She took the gift and turned around with a smile on her face. There was no trace of her earlier tit-for-tat attitude. Sun Dongqing saw that the family's attitude had changed in an instant and felt proud. She said with a faint smile, "Aunt is really more sensible than before. In the past, when I came back, I didn't know how to be polite. I only hoped that I could get something for my family. I still remember that your brother bought me a gold ring." Aunt was jealous and wanted to leave. Sun Dongqing's heart ached when she thought about the past, but she also felt happy when they didn't reply. "Zhixiang, go get a room for your second brother and his second sister-in-law. Taking Ying with you. The little girl will feel uncomfortable with us." Old madam, you didn't even give Sun Dongqing a proper look. She used to look down on Sun Dongqing, and now she looked down on her even more. The only thing she did wrong in her life was to marry Sun Xueqing into the Yi family. She thought that her sister was stupid. Her sister often didn't come home and had a bad reputation in the village, so she should be stupid as well. She didn't expect that she would marry a soldier and almost ruin her only daughter's lifelong happiness. Chapter 767. Ying wanted to stay and listen to the past that she had never heard of. She wanted to give Yi Qian a good blow, but the old woman sent her away. "Ying, go take a walk with your aunt. It's raining cats and dogs, so stay in the hotel tonight. You can go to school early tomorrow morning to complete the transfer procedures," Yi Zhifan said. Some things were not suitable for his daughter to know. It was time for dinner. Yi Zhixiang, who had booked 2 more luxurious suites, was led by the waiter to check on the cleanliness of the rooms. Her attitude towards Ying was neither cold nor cold. She only asked a few questions when they came down, but did not say anything else. A food delivery van stopped in front of the elevator. The waiter spoke into the walkie-talkie. "Inform Missy on the 9th floor that we are going to deliver the food. Inform her in advance to avoid disturbing the guests." Yi Zhixiang and Ying looked at each other. Yi Zhixiang lowered her head slightly. "Go back to your room and inform your uncle, and we'll go up with him." When her second brother mentioned Yi Qian, her niece's face was full of hatred. It was clear that the two were not on good terms. Nothing would happen if she went up to find him. "Okay, then be careful, Aunt. She's not someone to be trifled with." Dealing with Yi Qian was the common goal of the two families. They put aside their prejudice and joined forces in the blink of an eye. The food delivery van did not go with them. It was waiting for another elevator. Ying got out of the elevator on the 8th floor, while Yi Zhixiang took the elevator to the 9th floor. She was now more and more certain that the person she had met before was Yi Qian. After changing, Yi Qian watched TV to pass the time while waiting for the food delivery van to arrive. Occasionally, he would look up at the half-open curtains to see if the rain outside was getting lighter. It was raining cats and dogs all the time. Occasionally, there would be a clap of thunder. The lightning in the sky was like an electric dragon. It was frightening. "I wonder if we've arrived. Will we be able to take off on time?" Amidst another clap of thunder, Yi Qian murmured softly. Then he heard the doorbell ring. A waiter's voice came through the door. "Hello, your dinner is here." Downstairs, old Madame Yi and her son-in-law were followed by a few men in suits who looked like hired thugs. When they got out of the elevator on the 9th floor, they saw Yi Zhixiang's figure dashing past them and rushing straight ahead. It seemed that he had found that little B***TCH. "You guys follow them. Don't let anyone hurt Mississippi." Old Madame Yi was the daughter of a capitalist family. She had no choice but to lower her head during the crackdown. Now that life was better, she naturally put on the airs of the old society. Raising his hand, without the consent of his son-in-law, Sun Yaozu, a few thugs rushed over. When the dining cart was pushed in, the door was open. The waiter did not expect a guest to barge in, and Yi Qian did not expect Yi Zhixiang to be so capable as to find her room number. Earlier, the lobby manager had promised not to reveal any guest information. A hotel had to abide by the rules. How did Yi Zhixiang get her hands on it? "Oh, it really is Yi Qian. You sure made it easy for your aunt to find you." Yi Zhixiang, who had barged in, smiled and spoke before the waiter could. She directly revealed her identity, causing the waiter to lose his judgment for a moment. Then, The sound of running footsteps came from outside. They all stopped at the door. Then an old lady with black hair and a healthy complexion walked in. Chapter 768. Old Madam Yi walked into the room and immediately saw the girl sitting calmly in the hotel lounge chair. She glanced at her face, and when she saw her face clearly, she was shocked. Similar, really similar. She looked exactly the same. Not only were her facial features similar, even her temperament was the same. She was like a pine tree that refused to bend no matter how hard she tried. There was no doubt that she was Yi Qian. She could tell at a glance that she was the child of that woman. Old Madam Yi sized up Yi Qian, and Yi Qian did the same to this old woman. Neither of them felt any sense of kinship. Inside, she wore a simple, modified, loose cheongsam with 3 rows of diagonal buttons at the collar. She was probably old and afraid of the cold. Outside, she wore a great purple long silk coat with complicated handmade embroidery. It was buttonless, and only the collar was buttoned with a pure gold rose pin. She looked very noble and energetic. One look, and anyone could tell that she was an old lady who lived like a princess. You are indeed my eldest granddaughter whom I haven't seen in a long time. Old Madam Yi smiled. Her smooth, wrinkled face was full of kindness. Even her gaze towards Yi Qian was full of kindness. Your aunt said she saw you just now. I thought she was seeing things, but I didn't expect it to be true. The waiters turned on their walkie-talkies. When they heard that they were family, they placed the dishes one by one on the tea machine. They said to Yi Qian, "Your dinner is all here. If there's anything..." They lowered their heads and glanced at the old lady and another middle-aged woman who came in. They paused for a moment, then said, "If there's anything you need, you can contact our staff at any time." It was not convenient for the hotel to intervene in family matters. However, the waiter saw that the middle-aged woman who came in first did not come with good intentions. So they said one last thing. Yi Qian nodded slightly at them and said, "Thank you." Then he said, "It's better for the hotel to send someone over. I'm a guest of the hotel. Someone trespassed into my room without permission. I need an apology from the hotel." Trespassing? My eldest niece, you've caused enough trouble. You've run away from home for so long and even made the old lady come to find you personally. If you've caused enough trouble, you should go home, lest your family worries. Yi Zhixiang frowned and put on a helpless expression. If you're done, come home with us. Don't bother the hotel. This was a hotel with a background. Someone had brought a gun to warn her husband's men not to cause trouble. In that case, it was better to deal with things in a low-key manner. Old Madam Yi, who was silent, sighed and said to the waiter, "This is my eldest granddaughter. She had a conflict with her family. Previously, it was also because of the conflict that the hotel was alerted. You can go and do your work. We will deal with our own matters behind closed doors." She was used to being the head of the household at home, and it was the same outside. The waiter glanced at Yi Qian, then at the amiable old madam. He bowed his head and left politely. Yi Qian, who was not familiar with this old lady, quietly observed her. After a while, this seemingly kind old lady gradually overlapped with the one who disliked her when she was 3 years old and scolded her every day. This money-losing thing should have been strangled to death the moment she was born. What a waste of our family's food. So gluttonous. Are you a reincarnation of a hungry ghost? Stand aside. You're not allowed to eat. Damn it, a good bowl of steamed eggs is all gone. Chapter 769. Before she was 3 years old, the old lady had never treated her well. She scolded her every day, hit her every day, and slapped her on the head without leaving a mark. She fed her water quickly, and even forced her to drink when she choked. However, when her father came home, his face was completely different. He hugged and kissed her, calling her his sweetheart. He even said that she didn't eat this or that, and he would see if he could find some rice paste to feed her tomorrow. Now, seeing her smiling face again, Yi Qian smiled lightly and said, "Old madam, we haven't seen each other for at least 6 years. I'm not used to you calling me your granddaughter every time you come. May I know what you're here for? If there's nothing else, I need to eat. Yi Qian spoke in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. He didn't get too close, but he didn't appear too friendly either. He responded calmly and appeared very calm. Seeing this, old Madame Ye's eyes moved slightly. She really had changed. Not just a little, but a lot. It was during the first half of the 4th year that the situation in the southern province was much more relaxed. Her daughter, who was in need of money, needed to go back to the village to borrow money from Yi Jifan, so she secretly returned to the village on New Year's Eve. At that time, Yi Qian was a pitiful little girl. She was thin, short, and so cowardly that she didn't even dare to speak. When she saw how she was raised, she even said to Yi Jifan, "Not bad. Girls should be like this." Who knew that when she came back 6 years later, the little girl would become like her mother. That idiot son Dongqing couldn't even raise a child. She was so stupid that no medicine could save her. And that girl Ying, she looked smart, but who knew that she would become like that idiot son Dongqing? "Child, it seems like you're angry with me. Good girl, I know you've suffered. I originally wanted to hand you over to your aunt's house for your own good. Who knew that you wouldn't be used to it?" The older, the wiser. Yi Zhixiang's expression changed, but the smile on old Madame Ye's face didn't disappear. Instead, she smiled even more helplessly. "How about this? If you really don't want to live with your aunt's family, then come with me to live with your aunt's family. Your aunt is doing well these days. She bought a villa along the coast. You can stay in whichever room you want." No matter how clever the little girl was, she was still a little girl. She was still young and much easier to coax than her mother. If he coaxed her patiently, he wouldn't be afraid that she wouldn't listen to him. That was old Madame Ye's plan. She gave her daughter, Yi Zhixiang, a look, hinting for her to say more. Yi Jian walked to the bedside table and pressed the call button for the front desk. "There's a group of people here. They're interrupting my meal. Please send someone to send them away before I get angry. Thank you." Old Madame Ye's gaze suddenly became as sharp as a needle, directly piercing towards Yi Jian. The kindness on her face gradually faded. She said in a low voice, "Yi Jian, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to disrespect your grandmother? You're rebelling. Even when your father was still alive, he didn't dare to disrespect me. What? Now it's your turn as a granddaughter. Can I say a few words?" Old Madame Yi might be old, but when her face darkened, she had an aura that even Yi Zhixiang didn't have. Seeing that Yi Qian wasn't cooperating, she vaguely understood that this girl in front of her wasn't someone she could control in a short period of time. Since she wasn't going to send her away, then she would send someone to send her away. Chapter 770. "Let the 2 men in," she instructed Yi Zhixiang in a low voice. Although her voice was soft, Yi Qian heard it clearly. She hung up the phone and saw Yi Zhixiang walking outside. A trace of coldness flashed through her cold eyes. She said calmly, "Old madam, you're still as unreasonable as before. You were young and didn't know any better. Now that you're more mature, you can see the true colors of some people. Old madam, don't you think I should be more careful?" Yi Qian walked to the coffee table and looked at tonight's dinner. The corners of her lips curled up even higher. Captain Xia was quite good at ordering. The combination of red and green was appetizing. After looking at the dinner, Yi Qian glanced coldly at the 2 thugs who came in. Not only was there coldness in her eyes, there was also mockery. She glanced meaningfully at the door. There was no trace of fear on her face. She said slowly, "After all, I almost died in the hands of Annie's family. Grandma, weren't you sitting next to me? I was really scared. Your granddaughter was about to be beaten to death, but you didn't stop her." Yi Zhixiang's face darkened at the mention of the past. She chuckled. "Oh, you have a good memory at such a young age. How can you still remember something that happened so long ago? If you hadn't pushed your cousin into the snow, your uncle wouldn't have been so angry. Auntie is old, but her memory is indeed good. It was clear that Yi Ying and my cousin fought over food. I, who had neither food nor clothes, suffered for no reason." Yi Qian walked to the 2 thugs with a calm expression. They were standing behind old Madame Yi. Standing in front of old Madame Yi Qian pursed her lips and sighed. Grandma, your granddaughter still remembers how cruel you were back then. I'm not the only one who remembers it. Everyone in the village remembers it. Later on, they often told me, a snake's tongue is sweet, a scorpion's tail is stinging. Both are not poisonous, but a woman's heart is the most poisonous. They told me to stay away from you. At this moment, old Madame Ye's expression had already sunk to the point that it was like water that had sunk into rust. It was dark and gloomy, yet it was as calm as water. Looks like your aunt is getting worse and worse these years. She has spoiled you to the point where you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You even dare to talk back to your grandmother. He raised his hand and ordered the people behind him. You two take my disobedient granddaughter back. Back then, she sat on the chair and watched coldly as he was beaten to a pulp by Sun Yaozu. After 6 years, she still wanted him to respect her as his grandmother. It was truly wishful thinking. Grandma, I don't dare to go with you. It wasn't easy for me to survive. Would I dare to acknowledge you? Would I dare to keep you? Do I dare to follow you? Yi Qian let out a long sigh. With her beautiful features, she faced the two men who had stepped forward. Her right hand touched her left wrist, and the silver thread that acted as a bracelet fell into her hand. With a sigh, she smiled and said, If it were you, would you dare to go back with someone who wants to kill you? You wouldn't dare, would you? His actions were swift, completely like a sudden clap of thunder. He used the silver wire in his hand to fiercely wrap around the neck of one of the thugs. His arm pulled hard, and then he fiercely used his strength to wrap around the neck. He directly approached the man whose face had instantly turned red from the entanglement. He raised his leg and fiercely kicked the man's knee. This unforeseen event happened too quickly. It happened so quickly that old Madame Yi and Yi Zhixiang didn't even have time to react. The thug who had been strangled didn't even have time to scream before he fell to his knees. Chapter 771. Someone come, someone come, someone come. Old Madame Yi was the first to react. At the same time, she pushed Yi Zhixiang aside and told her to leave first. How could Yi Qian let these two go so easily? She stepped on the man she kicked and leaped into the air. Her legs formed a pair of scissors and clamped down on the neck of the other thug, who reacted. As she spun around, the thug screamed and fell to the ground with his neck cut by Yi Qian. There was no sound from him. No one knew if he was dead or alive. Coincidentally, he blocked the path of the screaming Yi Zhixiang. Grandma, you're really not being kind. You actually sent thugs over. Do you miss your granddaughter? If that's the case, then I can only protect myself. In the blink of an eye, Yi Qian, who had deftly taken care of the two thugs, stood in front of the mother and daughter. His smile did not change as he said leisurely, Since you've invited me, then I can only send you away like this. Old Madame Ye's authority had not been challenged in a long time. Her amiable face was now cold. Old Madame Yi, who had been praying to Buddha for a long time, was indeed affected by Buddha's aura. When she smiled, everyone would say that she was a kind person. At this moment, his face was gloomy and cold. It was even more chilling than his usual ferocious-looking face. Yi Qian had already seen some clues. Standing in the room, Yi Zhixiang only needed one look from old Madame Yi to immediately obey. Sun Yaozu was now outside the room, but the thugs were listening to old Madame Ye's orders. Back then, Sun Yaozu kicked her until she fainted and threw her unconscious self outside in the heavy snow. In the end, it was the village chief, Di Bo, who saved her. In the past, she thought that perhaps the whole family was afraid of her little uncle. Now, it seemed that Sun Yaozu was clearly standing at the door, but he did not come out. It was all under old Madame Ye's control. From this, it could be seen that the one in charge of her little uncle's family was still old Madame Yi, an old madam who could control her daughter's family outside, and even her son-in-law had to listen to her orders obediently. This was no ordinary old madam. Then, why did Sun Yaozu hate her so much? Why did her own grandmother just stand by and watch? Why did no one come out to stop Sun Yaozu's atrocities? She hadn't thought about these things before, but now that she saw these people, she couldn't help but think deeply. She was just a child and had no enmity with Sun Yaozu. Why would he hate her so much? Then, there was only one explanation. It was the resentment of his parents that made Sun Yaozu transfer his hatred to her. There was another problem. Dad and Yi Zhixiang were both the old lady's children, but why was the old lady so biased? Why did she only care about her daughter and not her son? Could it be that old Madame Yi, who was born as a capitalist, did not favor boys over girls, but instead favored girls over boys? No, she was especially fond of Yi Zhixiang's two sons, especially her cousin, whose surname was Yi. She doted on him so much that her cousin, whose surname was Sun, had to step aside. From this, it could be seen that old Madame Yi still favored boys over girls. Yi Jian, who originally didn't want to pay attention to the Yi clan, had a myriad of emotions at this moment. Moreover, because of the various, almost abusive treatment from before, it caused her state of mind to suddenly lose balance. Her face became even colder, and even the space between her brows revealed a ghastly viciousness. When I was young and weak, I suffered in front of you. Now, I'm no longer the Yi Qian of the past. How can I let you continue to be so arrogant? My grandmother is not kind, and my relatives are cruel. If I, Yi Qian, don't be strong, I'm afraid that tomorrow morning there will be another unsolved case in this city. Chapter 772. Yi Qian's calm voice was now filled with hostility. He tightened his grip on the silver wire, causing the thug's eyes to roll back. He would definitely suffocate to death soon. Yaozu, come in quickly. That damned hussy is going to kill someone. Yi Zhixiang was terrified. If she had known that Yi Qian had become so powerful, she wouldn't have forced her way in. There was no movement outside. It was as if everyone had left. But from the looks of the door, they were still standing, not daring to move. Someone had taken out a gun and was aiming it at Sun Yaozu. When old Madame Yi saw that there was no movement outside, she vaguely understood that someone had come to the hotel. As the situation escalated, old Madame Yi calmed down. But when she saw Yi Qian's cold and ruthless expression, her heart couldn't help but thump. This damn girl was much more ruthless than her mother. She looked down and saw that the thug in her hand was about to suffocate to death. A glint flashed across old Madame Yi's eyes. If he died, she could just compensate the thug's family with a sum of money. As for Yi Jian, who had grown up, she seemed to be 16 or 17 years old. Murder was against the law, so she could not escape punishment. She could also punish her current guardian by the way. If that was the case, it was indeed a good thing. She had thought it through well, but Yi Qian had undergone rigorous training. Even if he was filled with hostility, he didn't forget about the thug who was entangled by the silver wire. Seeing that the thug's black eyes were about to roll back, Yi Qian loosened his grip and easily retracted the silver wire. At the same time, he didn't even look down. He lifted his leg and kicked the man who was about to suffocate to death several times in the chest. Under old Madame Yi's secretly disappointed gaze, the thug began to cough violently. Yi Qian lifted his leg again and kicked the thug's leg. The thug, who was about 174 meters tall and weighed at least 140 kilograms, flew at least a meter away. This matter is getting a little out of hand. Lobby manager, how did you do your job? How could you let someone behave so atrociously in my hotel? A man in a silver-gray suit walked over. He was smiling as he walked in, but the viciousness in his eyes made Yi Zhixiang's mouth fall open. This 35-year-old man, with fine wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, looked a little familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. Those who could leave an impression on him must be from the underworld. Since they were from the underworld, she could not be presumptuous. She reminded old Madame Yi, whose face was still livid from anger, softly, "Mom, this man looks a little familiar. Are they from the underworld?" Old Madame Yi calmed herself down and looked at the man who was about 35 or 36 years old. Her slightly cloudy eyes began to size him up. The man walked to Yi Qian's side and sized up the young lady who had young Master Xia come out to protect her. She was indeed good-looking and had a certain spirit about her, especially when he saw her attack just now. She was fast, ruthless, and accurate. She didn't look like a 16 or 17-year-old girl at all. Young Master Xia actually liked spicy food. If Yi Wei knew about it, would she be surprised? Young lady, I'm sorry. It's my hotel's fault for scaring you. As the man spoke, he took out a platinum business card. My surname is Ho, and my first name is Z. You can call me Brother Z. Call me Uncle. Ha ha ha, it makes me look old. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.